Welcome to Sloppy Spoilers with your host, DT2. What's up, y'all? DT2 Comics Chat here. Welcome to another episode of Sloppy Spoilers. On this episode, we're going to discuss Season 1, Episode 8 of The Wheel of Time, The Eye of the World. This is the season finale of the first season, and I have to tell you, it needs to be subtitled, What to What? I'm somewhat at a loss for words, and not in a good way. So I'm going to bring on my co-host, and we're going to dive right in. Welcome to David Nemesis Howard.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? I am ready to talk about this episode. I know this is called Eye of the World, but I have to be honest, after watching this episode and large parts of it, I was in the Eye of Wrath. So strap in, everybody.
That's good. Welcome to Steve, Shade Wing Sellers. What's up, Steve?
That's what I can say about this episode. I mean, there are things about it that I didn't think were that bad, and then there are things in it that are just kind of like missed opportunities, things that just don't work, that are ridiculous. And we're going to get into all of these most likely, and try not to rant too hard.
Oh no, it's going to be ranting and rolling up in this mug. Welcome to Jeff, Dr. Faye Bracey. What's up, Jeff?
Let's finish this.
That's right. That's right. Oh, it's going to be ranting aplenty, folks. So get your cornbread and your grits out. It's going to be for real. In terms of general impressions and overall thoughts, I'm numbed with being underwhelmed, and part of that is being spoiled by better writing. Because if there's one thing I could say to sum up this episode, everything we saw, we've seen it before done better. And that's kind of one of the drawbacks of being a longtime sci-fi, fantasy, action, horror fan is that, you've got to work a little bit harder to shock or draw out or whatever. You got to write better. You got to raise the bar. And that's what we all try to do in our individual and team efforts. But with this one, just about every way that I personally would have gone as a writer didn't even seem like it was on the table. So I'm just scratching my head. I'm like, I couldn't even follow, in most cases, the logic, because once again, the one thing that the show consistently does is undermine its own mythology, undermine its own lore. In this episode, over and over again, I'll just touch on this one, and then we're going to take a deep dive when we get back to it. This is a very common mistake in TV and film, to the point where I'm like, I don't get why this is not understood. You've only got one first reveal. And whenever you reveal a character for the first time, it needs to have an impact. It needs to change the tone of the scene. It needs to change the flow. It needs to feel like everything that happens after that point is different because of the reveal. And what did they do with the Dark One? They took off his Dormammu face and they made him a duty dude with a beard. And he wasn't even an intimidating looking duty dude. I was like, really? No. Really? And I was like, this works for every movie, but it particularly works for the superhero genre. See, the first time you see the hero on the screen, it's got to be this incredible moment with a soundtrack to match, and it sets the tone to make you hungry for the next 2 hours of the film. If you want to see a film that did that right, The Matrix. When we first see everybody, we hear them, and then we see Trinity, and then we see her do all that incredible stuff that we'd never seen in bullet time like that before. And we were like, wow, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. That's how you take advantage of the first time you see a character. Or if you're talking about Superman, the first time you see him change, it ought to be slow enough for you to see every step. And like Chris Reeve's Superman, you ought to see the shirt rip and the shield coming right at the camera because you know it's about to be on. That's how you reveal Superman for the first time. Stuff like that. And that's basic stuff. And I'm not even a filmmaker, but I am a writer. So in this episode, we had moments like that, but particularly with the Dark One. And it was like, and he looked like I would imagine Victor Von Doom to look before he had his accident. But he was way too calm and way too casual. And he looked like he needed a Snickers, man. You look hungry. And I'm like, that's the Dark One, really? I'm telling you, man, I was underwhelmed. So anyway, let me hear from my co-host. Give me your general impressions of the episode. Start with Steve.
Yeah, this episode was just like, and I will say that the bit with the Dark One and with Rand was probably among the better stuff this episode, because that's where at least they had Jordan to draw on more. But on the other stuff, they actually admitted in one of the extras that, we didn't know what to do with these characters because people had complained that there needed to be more to do with these other characters on the side. So we just basically made it up. Okay, great. That's wonderful. You really do realize that these are the characters we don't like, that we don't want to see very much of. And no, let's focus on them and not on the chosen one whose story that this is about, which is Rand al'Thor. And so, you're kind of starting off making that mistake. You have a prologue, which made me hate the Aes Sedai even more. We'll get into that, no doubt.
Yep.
And then on top of this, it's like you have the Dark One, where they make the mistake that Tolkien in Lord of the Rings did not make, which is they actually showed the Dark Lord in all of his glory, and it's just like, nah, there's just nothing there. With Lord of the Rings, you never saw who Sauron was. You didn't need to physically see him. Right. He was an overwhelming presence. Right. You knew what he was doing because you knew he was controlling everything that was going on. You see how his followers fear him and all of that. When the Dark One's followers and all the Trollocs and people like Patton Fane, talk about the Dark One, okay, yeah, they're in the hushed tones and the reverence. But when you look at the guy, it's like, okay, this is the dude that played the devil in The Howling Man. And at least you could get away with the devil looking like that in 1959. You cannot get away with him looking like this in 2022. It's just no. This there needed to be more to that, and it just wasn't there. But I mean, in the middle of this, there are some things here and there that I liked. I mean, I do like that Moiraine actually takes a pretty big hit and a pretty big sacrifice. I kind of like that there are some moments between her and Rand because I feel like that's an important relationship. And little things here and there, but. And of course, Nynaeve appearing to die was one of those where you're cheering for the wrong reasons, but you're cheering at least. So, give him credit for that. But then they pretty much ruined that too, as we'll talk about. So, yeah, all in all, it's just like, okay, it's a damp squib, unfortunately.
Before I throw it to Jeff, and this will be a good segue to throw it to Jeff, villains that are good screen villains have presence. You feel their presence on the screen even when they're not on the screen. The Terminator, the Borg, Darth Vader. You feel them even when you don't see them. They're looming in the background and in the back of your mind because they have such presence. The first Terminator was set in Los Angeles, but it was a claustrophobic film. See, only a magic director could pull that off. To put be in a major metropolitan city, but it was a very, very small kind of chase film. And wouldn't you think you should be able to get away from someone in Los Angeles? That kind of thing. But this guy that, is signaling the end of the world, and we get to his little tunnel of power, and it was just underwhelming in every possible way. So I'm going to throw it to the master of movie monsters, Jeff Bracey. What are your overall impressions, Bracey?
You said two things that I was already going to bring up myself. Presence and Darth Vader. And you're talking about reveal of heroes, but like you said, you also get the only chance to reveal a villain. And I couldn't help immediately when you were talking about that, thinking about Darth Vader's presence when he first pops on the scene. Doesn't say a word. This big fights happen. The white corridor with all these white kind of skeleton-looking troopers. They were meant to look like skeletons. Facing these guys who are, clearly under-armored compared to them. They get overwhelmed. And then this, 7-foot tall, samurai death's head figure comes walking out, and he just surveys the carnage like death over a battlefield. That had an impact. He's the darkest thing in that whole scene. It was very skillfully done. How there's and without a word being spoken, without him doing anything threatening at all, just his appearance and his height and all that exuded a menace that became palpable throughout the series. So I'm looking at this, and immediately I'm wishing that the actor who played Logain was playing the Dark One, because that guy has presence.
Yes.
When he wants it, he has a palpable menace. He has charisma. I feel like, and we've already seen that this guy can sway others. I feel like that's who he should be. Like, man, the actor who plays Logain just kills it. Nothing against the other actor, because I have no knowledge of his previous work. I've got nothing to compare his role here in. But I feel like he was just terribly miscast or misdirected. He just doesn't feel right. As soon as he lost the scary face, I was like, he's just a dude. I'm not getting anything from him. And if a villain is not impactful, you just lose that. I mean, look at what you got Johnny Depp as Grindelwald in the Harry Potter films, and now being followed up by Mads Mikkelsen. Two powerful actors right there, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Mads Mikkelsen does, because I've watched him in Hannibal. I know this guy can play a villain with just oozing magnetic charisma and just that sense of menace and malice. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he does, even though I really wish Johnny Depp had been allowed to continue the role, because that's what you need. You know, you think about the incomparable Ray Fiennes as Voldemort, and what a great reveal when he's finally restored to his body and we get to see him. And I love the particular way that he would hold his wand like a maestro directing an orchestra, a very delicate particular way. And I haven't seen anybody hold a weapon quite like that until we got to see the Bene Gesserit with the Gom Jabbar, a very cool way of holding, where other people just kind of like swishing it around like it's a little rapier or something. Like, no, he holds it with this delicate kind of presence, and I just appreciate that. But this guy either isn't coming across with anything, or he's not being directed to do anything, because some actors just like to kind of create, and others really want to be directed. So there's different approaches to that. But whatever the failing here is, I just was not getting it. And so for that, among other reasons that we'll get into, the climax of this series and the climax of the episode for me was completely underwhelming. I do want to add one interesting thought, because I don't want to lose this before we get into it deeper. Is I was watching a little bit on Amazon's upcoming Lord of the Rings series, and somebody was talking about the mixing of the racial component in there, and not to get like too crazy or anything, because we have gotten into this a little bit about how we've got these widely diverse races in here, and I realized here's another missed opportunity of the series. If this has been going on for 1,000 years, everybody would kind of be a homogeneous color by now. So there's, but that's, if you want to go into an evolutionary stance, that's not how things happen. When people live in certain areas, you get, changes in melanin, changes in stature, changes in physicality because of our environment, how much sun we've got, what we're eating, the type of environment we have to live in. Is it mountainous? Is it by the shore? Is it jungle? All of these things play a part in adapting our bodies and our culture. And it's in this city in particular, where we have this final battle, that we see the greatest amount of a singular sort of culture. Very, very Asian, very reminiscent of Japanese and Chinese in particular, with a little bit of a sort of a Hindi flavor to it here and there. And I couldn't help but think that's one of the beautiful things about exploring a world, is when we go to Rohan, we see the Viking influence. When we go to Minas Tirith, we see the medieval European influence. When we go to the Shire, we see their culture. When we go visit the elves, be it wood or the high elves. We see their disparate cultures, and we were cheated of that because of this need to try and cherry pick things from all over the world and cram them into each and every scene in a way that is not organic and it's just not true.
Okay, now Jeff pointed out something which would be a good segue before I throw it to Nims. And this is to the writers. Okay, putting on my writer hat again for a minute. Here it comes. It's always a mistake to show a better version of what you're trying to pull off before you get to the main version. You want an example of that? Black Canary, when Katie Lotz played her. Okay, because Katie Cassidy hit her stride as Black Siren. But the closest we got to seeing Dinah Lance on the scene in the CW Arrowverse was when Katie Lotz played the Canary, but she was much more like the Black Canary we were expecting. Okay, when you have a couple that's a better couple, then you break them up to try to force a different ship. See, so when you've seen a better version of what you're trying to do before you see the main version, it's always a letdown. Logain outshines the Dark One in presence, in menace, in display of power, in a belief in himself. Over and over again, Logain is the more interesting character. So we've seen a better version of both the Dragon Reborn and the Dark One. And then we see this and we're like, see what I mean? That's always a mistake. It's not sometimes a mistake. It's always a mistake when you show a better version before you get to your main version, because then people will be like, no, bring that back. That one was better. Throw it to Nims. Overall impressions.
Yeah, I need to keep this brief, but I'm going to start off with this. Everything I'm about to say from here on, if perhaps we cover season 2, is going to be about this series, because the series is so far divorced from the book that it's hard to even think that the two things, they're not really related. So that said, I think this final episode is a failure in 4 categories: production, direction, effect, design, and then finally casting.
Writing.
I'm sorry, writing, because directing is going to go to acting. Acting possibly, but I think it's directing. And here's why I'll say that. First, production. At one point in the end of this, they mention the Dark One mentions that the 5 of them are all cogs in the wheel of time. Well, we already know off screen that one of the 5 was shit canned off the show. He's gone. So it's like, that's bad production on a number of levels. You didn't get the contract done. And if you did get the contract done, you got to cut that from the writing, because if the guy took off in episode 6, you can't have that line in there. You got to be on top of that as a producer to get that out of there or change it or something. That's number 1. I'm going to skip ahead to design. I like a lot of the design here. I think there's a lot of really good elements and things that came in. They're very interesting. We don't focus on them. For instance, the defense of that wall and everything. That's an interesting concept that could have really raised the stakes in this episode. But also, you have to look at the design of that. Now, I'm going to be honest with all of you. I'm a former Army officer. Jeff is a former soldier in the Army. I look at these things a little different, but I look at that wall. Those peaks that wall is situated in between are situated in a way that you could go over them and come behind the wall. That's first of all. Second of all, even if they are cliff faces, you create 2 walls. So that when you breach the first wall, you got to go down, and you're stuck now between 2 walls, and it's a killing zone. These are little things.
Classic castle design.
Yeah, but you have got to take these into consideration, especially since this has been a fortress bulwark for decades. These people are.
I will also add, they have held themselves out in that area for 1,000 years. And you're going to tell me that with bad design like you're talking about, that they would have survived for that long? No, I don't buy that. And this is why I was hoping you would weigh on this, because you guys know that better.
Yeah, exactly. And it just, to someone like me, and probably Jeff as well, I look at that and it's just a huge red flag. And it's like, if you don't know this stuff, that's fine. Everybody doesn't need to know this. There's plenty of people out there in Hollywood who are former military. They'll come in and advise you. They'll give you some advice on it. You got to pay a little bit of money, but it's not a lot, because you're not going to need. You're going to need to talk to them for about a couple hours. That's it. So do that, and it helps sell it more and make it more interesting. Next, I'm going to get to writing. There are so many writing holes here. I don't even really want to get into them, but there's so many times, right here. I'll wait until we get to when we talk about the scenes. But there's so many times when the writing writes itself into a hole or a dead end or something that's not believable, and it takes away from the arc as a whole. And that's unfortunate. It's like, if you know where you want to go with the story, then don't write yourself into a hole and then have to bail yourself out. And if you do that, you need to go back and re-edit everything and start over. I mean, that's just basic writing, which brings me to the last thing. And I'm going to disagree with you guys a little bit on the dark one. And this is directing. I think this is where acting. I think the writing here was okay. I think what they were going for is okay. What I don't agree with was what the director's choices were with this actor. Because I think what they were going for is Al Pacino.
You're thinking Al Pacino and The Devil's Advocate.
The Devil's Advocate.
It's classic temptation. That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they wanted. And
but you need a convincing tempter figure.
Yeah, and Al Pacino did little things that creep you out, like the little times he would lick his lips like he's a snake. Those little mannerisms and everything are like, oh, dude, oh my God, this guy, he's offering me the world, and then he's going to devour my soul when I take it. Those little things are the things where if we had that in this, we'd be screaming at Rand, don't do it. Rand, I mean, just the tension would be building up. And I think that's a director's choice. And if it was the actor not giving it to him, it's the director's job to make sure he gets what he needs to get out of the actor, or they get what they need to get out of the actor, or you find another actor. It's one or the other.
Okay. So, if you're going to be the embodiment and the personification of evil in the story, or an analog for the devil, then underneath whatever face you show, there has to be a layer of menace that's palpable. There has to be a layer there that you can feel. And like you said, it's up to the actor to convey it, or up to the director to pull it out of the actor. But it's the dichotomy of how you look and what you're saying and what you mean by what you say and the way you're saying it that conveys what they're talking about. And that
you're looking for Ian McDiarmid as Palpatine.
That's right. That's right. He even had the modulated voice, and I don't know if that was post-production or something he was doing, but he has an Emperor voice and he has a Chancellor Palpatine voice, and it's clear. But yes, that's another great example of, you can feel the menace, you can feel the evil, you can feel the hunger for devouring Anakin's soul and pulling him under control in everything that Palpatine does from scene 1. I just said that on Twitter. So let's jump into this first scene, because we could actually do the whole show on the first scene.
Yeah.
That's how frustrating it was. So in the first scene, we see the event that's been referenced from the beginning of the season about how when the Aes Sedai were men and women, and about how one man decided to take upon himself, with him and his Aes Sedai duty dudes, and go ahead on and face the Dark One. And it was because of his hubris that when men now use the one power, because the Dark One touched it against the phalanx of the men, and now it became corrupted for males. And now when males touch the one power channel, it is corrupted and they go mad. So we see the scene that's set. We didn't see that happen, which is what we should have seen. If we're going to show any scene, you have the conversation between them be a minute, and then you actually see them going up against that, and you see the corruption, you see all the different kind of stuff. You show, you don't tell. But instead, the whole opening scene is just a conversation where, once again, the female is rebuking the man and telling him, you shouldn't be doing this and you shouldn't be doing that. And he goes, the fate of the world is decided in the nursery. And she's like, I'm the ambulance seat, and I'm just trying to tell you, blah, 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 blah. And so it's another situation where it's like his pride doesn't let him listen to good counsel, and she's not going to support something she doesn't agree with. And now there's the gender dichotomy in the Aes Sedai. And I'm saying to myself during that whole scene, I'm like, once again, I'm not feeling anything except they're trying to bash the guy. But second of all, I actually want to see the conference. I want to see the moment. I want to see the moment when you're trying to cage the Dark One. You're the Dragon Reborn, and you're trying to do everything you know how to do. And the moment where everything gets corrupted for men, that would have been a scene worth watching. That would have been something like, wow, would have set a tone. Because when you do it that way, then when the Dragon Reborn, when Rand gets to that moment again, you're like, make the right choice this time. Because we've seen what happens, when you don't. But all we got was standing around talking, standing around rebuking, and then we cut to the intro. And I was like, really? We don't actually get to see it? That's the pivotal moment that drives the entire action of the show. Let me say that one more time. That's the pivotal moment that drives the entire action of the show, and we never get to see it. We just see more man bashing. And the actors didn't sell the dichotomy because that would have been a big deal. It felt like a spat between lovers, and it should have felt like when they were deciding to make America, when they were saying, are we going to do this or what? Are we really going to make a new country? Are we really going to rebel against England? Is this really going to happen? It should have felt like a moment like that. It should have felt like the Emperor's frying Luke like a side of Jedi bacon, and Vader's going, he's looking back and forth between the Emperor and his kid, and you knew he's in the valley of decision, because what he does in that moment is going to change everything going forward. And we knew that even before they added the crazy no sound effects, that kind of thing, where I was talking about on Twitter today. If Anakin had stayed put, Mace Windu legit beat Palpatine, and everything would have been different with it feels like that. There's destiny in the moment, and everything's going to be different based on these choices. And I felt none of that. I felt none of that. I was like, this is not the way. This is not the way to set up the most pivotal scene that drives the whole point of the show is this moment. And I wanted to see it. And I wanted him, it felt almost to me, and then I'm going to throw it to my co-host, and I hate this comparison because I hate this scene. It felt to me like Apollo choosing to die. You hear me say it all the time. In Rocky III, Apollo said it doesn't take a man to stand there and get his head beat in. In Rocky IV, Apollo stood there and got his head beat in. Why? His children weren't reason enough to live. His wife wasn't reason enough to live. He'd rather just let himself get beat to death. Why? Because you don't want to face the prospect of being an old man? Why? Why? You need a better reason than that. And then when we found out later in Creed, you had Adonis, you had plenty to live for. You had kids and grandkids. So most men would want to live to see that, but Apollo, for some presto changeo character flippo reason, just says, I'm just going to go out, and you're not even a martyr because you died for nothing but your own pride. This felt a little bit like that to me, like, wait a minute. This is momentous, and y'all having a little spat about something that is literally finna split the world, and it doesn't feel any bigger than that. I was just, so if you can't tell, I was severely disappointed. I wasn't just disappointed, I was disappointed with a severeness in this opening scene. So let me hear from my co-host, start with you, Nims, opening scene.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I have to reiterate that you have to separate the show from the book. And at this point, it is so divergent, you have to choose one or the other. And they're trying to force elements from the book into the show, and they just don't fit anymore. I mean, that's really what I have to say. And so they need to tailor them to try to make them fit both the book and the show, and then it really doesn't work. And I think that's what the main problem here is. And I get your point, and I got that in other places. I mean, the point where it's the men always seem to be the stupid ones or the ones that are doing dumb things. I have another place where I want to talk about that, so I'm going to keep my powder dry on that one because I want to talk about it when the men go out to defend the wall, and it's like, and that whole conversation between the brother and the sister, because that one bugged me. But I'm going to keep my powder dry for that one. But I mean, that's really my comment on that whole part of what happened in the first scene is that they needed to make a choice. It's like, look, if this is going to be Wheel in Time and name only, then wheel in time and name only. That's what you need to do. You know, just stop trying to pretend. And this goes to something I didn't bring up, which is that post-credit scene, or that final scene where the people came in to create the tidal wave. Cool looking scene. I've read the books. I know what that's supposed to be. But the average viewer who's watching this, they have no idea how that ties into anything. It completely stands alone and makes no sense. So even though I think it's cool because I know what would be coming up, not everyone has read the books, and most people haven't read all the books, so they have no idea what's going on. So, and that's not good for viewers of a TV series if you want the TV series to last. So,
okay, both Nims and Bracy comment on this next one, and I'm gonna throw it solely to Bracy. But here's another thing I forgot to mention in my rant, and that is that splitting your forces. Just something about that fundamentally rubbed me the wrong way, because I'm like, if you know they need support, or if you know it would be a better assault with the full Aes Sedai or with the full forces, because he says it later, you brought like 99 and that still wasn't enough. What would have happened if the women had joined, instead of her saying, we'll just hang back to pick up the pieces when you fail? Would it have made a difference had the women joined the men? Because we've seen some powerful women. We've seen Alana, we've seen Moraine, we've seen Lalandrin, we've seen Nynaeve, we've seen a whole bunch of stuff from the women we know now. So what about back then? What if they hadn't split the ranks and she had, for once, said, all right, let's be loyal, let's be in order, let's make a combined effort, sink or swim, because if we lose, the world is done anyway. Or, barring that, maybe split off a faction just to try to make a good assault with most of your troops. What do you guys think about that? Am I off with that or what?
I'll start and I'll kick it to Jeff. I'll just say this, not speaking directly to this world, but just in general. When you attack, we have this concept, this theory called combined arms, where you always want to combine all your different
multiplier.
Force multiplier, different kinds of attack. Well, if you take for granted, and the show says it, that men and women experience the one power differently, and that different people that use the one power channel it differently because they have different takes, then you are shooting yourself in the foot if you don't bring all of your different aspects of your force to act as force multipliers to attack something. Now, does that mean they would have been successful? I don't know. I don't know where they would have gone with any of that. There's so many different ways you could write it, but just from a military perspective, it's kind of utter madness. So,
Bracy.
Yeah, boy. This was dumb. This was dumb. If you want to leave a force back in the city as a final bulwark, that's fine. Got no problem with that. Because even the brother says, like, the sister's like, it won't hold. And he's like, no, I agree. But this battle isn't for us to win. I thought that was rather poignant. The trouble with this militarily is you basically have a choke point. That's a crucial, great thing. It actually cost the South perhaps capturing the capital in the Civil War. And we've seen in ancient Greece how well it worked at the Battle of Thermopylae. You have this choke point. It's fortified. If we ignore the fact that maybe these cliffs are unscalable for some reason, you got to come through this choke point, all the better. So we set up our women up on the battlements, the high battlements, where they are far and away out of danger, as out of danger as they can be. They are our artillery. Now, we've already got guys sniping from the lower battlements, and that's great. You want to take out as many people as you can coming. But I would even perhaps, because they came in with cavalry, I would have perhaps even sent a cavalry force out there while I have archers in the structure firing down. And on top of that, destroying the back ranks so you don't get that push. When you've got a great mass of bodies in a medieval war effort, the Spartans were very good at this, the Greeks and Romans in particular. You push the men in front of you. And, in the Greeks, they call this the Phalanx. And again, cavalry is made to break the front line of an enemy. And then if you have this massive on foot segment, that pushes in. You've got this massive bodies pushing against the bike. But if you've got somebody who can shell from up above beyond that rank, it's going to keep the Trollocs from pushing. It's going to break the force that they can apply as a superior force in numbers. And they could have broken their ranks with that kind of strategy, and I believe routed them. But this episode's poorly executed in so many ways, and this is just one more.
Yeah, and I think that goes to like that first scene with the Dark One as well. It's like, okay, even if you didn't bring warriors with you, you've got those different aspects. So like you look at what we've seen, you've seen mental powers, you've seen the ability to physically manipulate the weather, you've seen the ability to use against the earth. I mean, you're asking one person to defend against multiple types of attacks and multiple, and it's like, it just makes it that more difficult. So
yeah.
See, now that's making me feel like every stand in the episode was kind of ridiculous. Let
me add one more thing about that.
Go ahead.
Because they weren't just like 5 women in an open field defending the city before they get to the city, if they'd have been up on those battlements, they could have individually been raining destruction down. Even if it was just like, okay, I've got really weak power, I can only take out one guy at a time. But you've got at least 2 more who have a significant amount of power up there between Nynaeve and the sister. That would have been enough to continue to break the ranks, and it wouldn't have ended up just burning everybody out as they battled, because they had fallback positions, they had the other soldiers there with them. It all works so much better if they're together as a cohesive unit.
The last thing I would say that would kind of sum up why he was touching a little bit on that battle with on all that stuff. Just a quick aside, at the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon tried forever to get Wellington to come off of his position, which was so good. And Wellington just went behind the hill while they rained artillery down on them for hours.
Heck yeah.
And it was so infuriating Napoleon that Napoleon is quoted as saying, "This guy fights sitting on his ass," but it worked. And it worked. It worked because once you find a defensible position, that's the whole thing. You always fight. You make the enemy fight your fight, whatever you're doing.
Damn straight.
So, right.
Yeah, Sam Houston did the same thing at the end of the Texas Revolution.
So,
Absolutely.
Steve, the fate of the world was decided in a nursery. How do you feel about that?
Not very good. I blame the Aes Sedai for all this. Everything that they're dealing with now, this is the fault of the Aes Sedai for breaking up the Aes Sedai and not supporting the dragon when they had the chance at Cajun Scott. Because he mostly succeeded. And he mostly succeeded. There was a small crack, which is why the Dark One still had influence. But the reason there was that small crack is that the Aes Sedai did not go in and help fully cage this thing. The problem is that all of the male Aes Sedai had a power that the Dark One could taint and gradually corrupt. The way to deal with that is not to say, no, you're stupid and I'm going to berate you and you shouldn't go. No, it would have been to go in there to backstop the male Aes Sedai for 2 reasons. One is to provide power in the fight in case the Dark One did something that they didn't expect, like what he did. And B, to backstop the male Aes Sedai in case they went mad. But no, it's like they wanted to wipe their hands of the whole thing and split the order. And it just goes back to the same problems we've had with the Aes Sedai from episode 1. They're insufferable. They're sanctimonious. They're hypocritical. They have their own agenda and they pretend to be virtuous while at the same time they only do things for their own greater power, which is exactly what Ladra is here. Louis Theron was right. He was absolutely right. But, the Marimelon Seat didn't want to go along with it. And she's responsible for the breaking of the world because she did not do a thing while Louis Theron and the 100 companions went off to their deaths, to do something about it. What were they supposed to do? If the Dark One if the Aes Sedai had done nothing, the Dark One would have overrun the entire area and probably did worse than what ultimately happened. But instead it's just, okay, Louis Theron and the dragon, he's the one who is destined to stop the Dark One. That is his fate. That he is the chosen one. He has the power to do this. All he needs is a little bit of support from the Aes Sedai. It didn't even have to be the whole order. It could have been like, maybe some of their more powerful members, something. You could have still had, a contingent of Aes Sedai left over as a backstop in case something happened. I mean, but they didn't send one. They didn't send a single Aes Sedai to go with 100 companions. They couldn't spare one person. Are you serious with this? No. The breaking of the world is on the feet of the Amerlin seat and the Aes Sedai, and everything that's going on with the breaking of the world and the Dark One getting out of his cage is entirely her fault. And I think that this needs to be acknowledged. It's just, I mean, I ended up despising the Aes Sedai after watching the scene and remembering, exactly what happened, and actually looking back into refresh my memory on some of the things that happened behind the scenes. And it's just like, there's just no reason to sympathize with the Aes Sedai left. I mean, it's not, they are in part a villainous force, and that caused this whole situation. I ended up having sympathy for Lews Therin, the dragon, and none whatsoever for the Aes Sedai after this whole scene. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I'm sorry. I giggled there, but when Steve was talking about one, I was thinking I can't spare a square from Seinfeld. So
not a square to spare.
Not a single square. But yeah, I agree with you. It's really the Aes Sedai acting virtuous here when they have, in the future when they have no cause to act virtuous. They didn't protect the world from anything. They let the world fall and then grab the reins of power. So
right,
and that's why I think you really need to decide in this, because this whole series has set the Aes Sedai up as some virtuous thing, even though we've seen the seedy underbelly the whole time, if you look closely. And it's like, and then you present this to us. It's like, this should have come earlier if you really wanted to put the Aes Sedai in focus for the whole series. So
okay, now, so fast forward, so we cue intro after all that happens. And by the way, the camera zooms outside and we're at Coruscant. I was like, really? But anyway, so cue intro, and then we come back into our real time when we catch up with our intrepid band.
I didn't get to talk about this section.
What'd you say? Yeah, you did when we talked about the.
No,
we were hitting.
Oh, you just did the military part. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was like, wait a second, I didn't get my thing. It was weird. The bickering, I'll try and keep this brief. I thought these two were going to be married to start with. Like, this was the wife of the dragon, and I don't know if that's the case or not. It really felt like it.
Yeah, it did.
It really felt like it. Like, you talked about, like, DT, like, it felt like a bickering couple, and it did so much to the fact that I was like, oh, is the dragon married to the Amerlin Sea? Oh, okay, that's cool. Oh, okay, not. She's leaving? All right, whatevs. And although I did think the reveal that, like, this place was kind of sci-fi in the future was kind of interesting. And that did set up a sort of a stake when you think about it. That if the dragon breaking the world sets you back that far, where you've gone from, like, sci-fi future to medieval period, well, then if they lose this time, they're going back to the Stone Age. And no doubt about it. That's pretty heavy. But I didn't like this scene for similar reasons you guys did, because as watching this, I was having to watch this on the road. Me and my wife were coming home from a hospital thing, a long drive. And I started talking to her about it. I was like, man, watching this scene again. I have to go back and watch the very first episode. And we see the breaking of the continuity within the Aes Sedai. You hear Moraine's voiceover, and she's saying, like, like ages ago, men in their arrogance thought they could tame the magic of the one power for themselves. Like, but wait. Okay, did you guys just lie to yourself? Did Dark Friends change things because you've lost records? Is this just your own revisionist history because you are arrogant and you've seized the reins of power? Because when we see the scene, I told my wife, like, look, we've only got two choices here looking at this. The dragon wants to do something. Apparently, because we'll get in the final battle, we talk about, like, oh, if we chain the dragon, he's not a problem again for another 3,000 years. Okay, so this is a cyclical event, we have to say. The dragon keeps being reborn, I think, because the Dark One keeps finding his way to coming loose. So if this is going to be a cyclical event, Lewis here saw a way to stop this forevermore, put it to rest. And he needed the backing He needed the backing of the other side of the equation. He needed the men and the women together, and he petitions for that. Meanwhile, the Amelin seat decides that I'm going to maintain the status quo. I'm going to kick the can down the road. This is going to be some other generation's problem. I'm just concerned about the here and now. Well, that's all well and good, but if it's kind of like when we talked about like Matt not being with the group, it's just a forestalling measure. Doesn't matter if the world ends in your lifetime, or does it matter if the world ends in somebody else's lifetime? The world still ends. That's your legacy, whether you're here to see it or not. And that was very unappealing to me. That it's like Steve said, there should have been a unity of purpose there. And later on the dragon, we'll talk about like, oh, he came here with 99 who were stronger than the one you brought. Imagine if he'd have come there with 200, the other half of whoever was at the tower, and he might have achieved what he achieved because he didn't achieve it by a narrow margin. And she seems to know what's going to happen. Like she's like, oh, he'll corrupt you, and we'll be there to pick up the pieces when you fail. And the most poignant thing he says, he turns there and is like, if you join us, we won't fail, but we know how it plays out.
So, once again, we've all said from one different angle or another, it probably could have been prevented had their forces remained unified from a military point of view, from a moral and ethical point of view, from a foreseeing the future point of view. That's what I'm saying. It was that moment. It's the moment that drives all the action.
Can I ask just a real quick one sentence answer question? Who do you think? Why do you think that the future they don't realize that the Aes Sedai caused that? Was it them lying to themselves, or has it been lost because it was
the world's broke and it's 1,000 years, and we've gone from from sci-fi to medieval period.
I think it's the Aes Sedai believing their own nonsense and then peddling it.
That too.
It's the first one. Yeah, them believing their own hype, but no, they are just pretending it didn't happen, because in the intro, Moraine says that the first time this happened, a man went out there, tried to cage the dragon, and she says, the arrogance. I told you I'm never going to forget that. So the way they spun the story was that you were so arrogant, you went out there and you thought you could shut this down by yourself. So now we women have to come fix your mess. Yeah. Is the exact way it's presented. But during this scene, we see that's not actually what happened.
Yeah, they were invited to the party from the get-go.
Right. Instead of everything you guys talked about from the military point of view, instead of creating a unified front that could have maybe changed the outcome, they said, no, we're going to let you fail. We're going to let you crash. And then we're going to grab power. Then we're going to talk about how incompetent you are for 1,000 years. That's what happened.
Yeah, I think it was first person account became history, became religious writing, and they got twisted every time. So
That's right. And like I said, so we saw Coruscant. I was like, really? The flying machines was back there? But anyway, so then we
I think they're trying to do like the fall of paradise kind of thing.
Okay, I'm about to talk about that. I'm glad you brought that up. So we fast forward to our situation today, and we find our intrepid heroes, Moraine and Rand, cutting through the field of halitosis to try to get close to the Dark One's lair. And let me tell you the mistake they made. And I'm going to key in on everything everybody talks about when it comes to temptation. If you read the scripture, if you want to use the original sin as it is often interpreted, and by the way, the Bible never mentions an apple. It says the fruit of the tree. Just want to throw that out there for accuracy's sake. What the devil tells Eve is that she will get a glow up if she gets over here in disobedience. If she goes against what God said, her life will improve. She will get higher perceptions, higher power. She will come up to a God level. That's actually what he tells her. And he tells her that she can choose death and not get death, that God was lying because he's really trying to hold you back from realizing a higher potential. So you're not actually going to die like he said you would, is how that plays out. Let me tell you how they messed that up here. And it's visual. it's not even just the conversations. First of all, if you're going to reveal your ugly face and then switch to your human face, we already know what you are underneath. So that kind of undercuts the whole temptation thing. One. Number two, but with the blight, which is my favorite part of everything, if your evil power is so evil that you corrupt the vegetation and it's worse as we get close to you, then why would anybody ever believe anything you have to say that what you're offering is a good thing? Do you understand? So if it's, it's like the way to do it right is Darth Vader's castle on Mustafar or the Wicked Witch's castle in Oz. It looked like evil lived there. We know what we're finna get when we go up in there because evil's all up in that mug because we can see it visually. But when we've already seen the ugly face and then you kind of morph yourself down to, David Duchovny's grandfather, and then when we've already seen the blight and everything covering, then anything you say cannot possibly be true because we've seen a visual representation of your evil. So they're cutting through the blight, and then they do it again in this scene with Moraine and Rand because they come across some boys out there, who are in over their head, which felt just like another jab at, you silly boys will be boys, you lost your life trying to play with something you didn't understand because this dude that we see is, corpseified and gangrened and eaten by mushrooms and has an eye distended, and it's a very disgusting kind of picture. And Moraine is like, they thought they could take on the blight. They thought they could play around here like this was a playground, but this ain't nothing to play with. And, and don't touch him. And then they touch everything around him, but she's like, don't touch anything in here. They're like, well, let me sit down, rest on the rock. But anyway, I'm like, so you can't have it both ways. What the devil was offering Eve, even though it was a lie, he convinced her it was a glow up. You can't see all the evil on the way to the fortress and then think anything he would have to offer would be better than the life you have now because you've seen his corrupting touch all along the way. So I don't know if they reasoned that out or not, but I was like, that's no temptation. If you're going to tempt somebody, you want to tempt them at least with the idea of something better than you have now. But they did what we call in writing the visit to death, especially when they showed that corpse. They showed you what he was about. And then when he shows up, he's kind of nonchalant and casual. But anyway, so they're cutting through everything. And that dream within a dream thing was actually kind of pretty cool, even though we saw it coming because we knew it had to be. It couldn't be anything else but a dream within a dream. So we knew that. It was still kind of cool watching it play out. But once again, they're contradicting themselves both in word and deed as they cut through the living halitosis. And I was like, okay, you're undercutting any type of buildup to any type of real temptation to listen to this dude. We've seen his face. We've seen the effect he has. We've seen that his evil power is growing. And if you want to see another example, I forgot who mentioned it. I think it was Steve. It's Palpatine. Palpatine told Anakin, he hit him right in his fear. I know you're scared of Padme dying. I know you've seen her die, just like you saw your mother die. But guess what? I got a way for you to get to power to stop Padme from dying. You got to cross some moral lines, but don't let that bother you because, good's a point of view. Don't let that bother you. If you listen to what I'm telling you, you can achieve a power greater than any Jedi, and you can save Padme. Lightsaber comes out. He said, "You're the Sith Lord." He's like, "You want to kill me, don't you?" He's like, "Yeah, I know you do." Just luring him in, luring him in, luring him in. That's how you tempt someone because you put something in front of them that they want. That's what the Dark One did with Egwene, but it wasn't Egwene. He said the values of this thing look like Egwene, but that's not really her. So how's that a temptation? So, I mean, over and over and over again, they're shooting themselves in the foot. If this was supposed to be a seduction journey, if this was supposed to be a moment where you got to choose and your choice is going to make or break the world, I'm like, no, there's no coherence in that. Now, I'm going to throw this out, and then I'm going to throw it to my co-host. Who should have been tempted was Moraine.
Nice.
You should have tempted more rain.
I was thinking Matt had he been there.
Okay,
Yeah.
Matt too. Matt, make that point when I throw it to you. Elaborate on that. But
Yep.
who should have been tempted by everything was Moraine.
Or Egwene, or Nynaeve, or
Right. He could have showed her a world where she had more power than she does now. He could have showed her a world where she could be the Amerlin Sea. He could have showed her a world where she could finally, instead of having to use mischief and trickery and basically be Loki and basically be playing, a plan within a plan, like Rand said, 5-dimensional chess all the time. She could just do a whole bunch of things and it wouldn't hurt. You wouldn't have to focus the channel. You could just do like Luke did. And if you notice in I started to call it the Mandalorian, in Boba Fett, he just lifted Grogu every time he walked. He was like, force forward, just like that, because Luke was always struggling until he hit the Jedi Master level. Now it's just like we can levitate as we walk and talk like it's nothing. He should have shown Moraine a life like that. And then she would have been like, maybe I should sell y'all out. Because she believed from the beginning that she could make things better. That's a real temptation. Go ahead, Nels.
I kind of disagree with you here, and this is why I disagree with you on Rand. I understand what you're saying, and I agree with all your points, but I think there was one line in here that undercut everything that was going on. If they cut this one line out, I could buy it. This kind of temptation, even if things bad's going on around you, there are some really, really dark stories out there where, like Chaos Gods and Warhammer and things like that, where people are getting cut up and everything. And you are so full of, well, that's not going to happen to me. I'm going to have power, but, so I'm not going to be the guy getting cut on. I'll be doing the cutting. And all of this appeals to vanity and selfishness and just those worst aspects of you. And so there's a line in here where Rand sees all of this and he says, I can't do this. I forget what the exact line is, but makes it sound like he is a good enough person that he can't do this because that's not who he is. He's rejecting temptation at that point. If they had left it right there, it would have been fine. But then they had to add this line in because of who they are. And I'm sorry, I'm going to use the word because it's woke, because it's feminist. They had to put the part in. That's not who she is. That's not who she chooses to be. Right away, you undercut Rand's moral stance here, because what does that mean? If she did choose it, you'd go for it?
Good point.
If she came in here and chose to remake the world and have a baby with you and everything, you'd say, screw everybody else? You have just, philosophically, you have just cut the moral legs out from Rand. Rand made the right choice, and with that one writing line, and that shows how writing is so important, you've got to think about this. They cut the moral legs right out from his whole argument, and he rejected the temptation of the Dark One for all the wrong reasons. All the wrong reasons.
Contrast that with Luke facing the same temptation. I am a Jedi like my father before me. That's all you needed. It's like, I am going to be the Jedi my father was not, and that is why I reject your offer.
I hear what you're saying.
I am still the dragon.
I guess the reason it didn't strike me that way is because Rand had already made up his mind in the Blight, which is why it didn't feel like any real temptation to me.
Yeah.
He'd already made up his mind that, whatever. So it didn't feel like it was a real choice or it had any real weight.
Yeah.
And I'm going to throw this out and I'm going to say this and then I'll throw it to y'all. It is reminiscent of Picard in the Nexus. Remember how they built up the Nexus? Guinan in particular, you're not going to want to leave. It's going to be your deepest desire. We saw that Soren was insane to get back to the Nexus. Let me go back. I want to go back. And they made it seem like this thing was it's like, Jason and the Sirens. Like once you get in the range of what the Nexus will do to you, giving you that life you've always wanted, you'll never want to go. Picard looks at one Christmas ornament, sees the Enterprise in it. He's like, this isn't real. And just like that, there was no spell. So that's what I mean when I say at no point did I feel like there was an actual spell between the Dark One and Rand.
Well, and I think that goes back to what I was talking about before with the direction, with the lack of the cast. I think your point is well taken. Also, that they had, from a writing standpoint, they wrote Rand rejecting the Dark One already.
Mm-hmm.
They should have left it open ending where he's sitting there going, figuratively going, he's like,
This would have honestly been more interesting if it had been Matt in that place.
Yeah. But they could have done something with Rand. They could have shown him those things and then just left it. And Rand is like, he's crying. Here's a perfect example. You show Rand his baby and everything, and then the Dark One takes it back and then goes, think about my offer. And as they're walking away, Moraine leading him, a single tear goes down his face. And then you're going, uh-oh, he's thinking about it. He's thinking about it.
I got to tune in next season now.
Yeah.
Now, when you're talking about your point about one line making a difference, this is the one, what I'm about to say, that, and it happened so quickly, but it was a missed opportunity. When he says, here you are again, Luz. And, you couldn't beat me the first time with 99, and you brought one Aes Sedai. And then he touches his face in a very kind of gentle, caressing, almost fatherly way and says, it's still you. I see you. Now, we have had no sense that it was Luz as the Dragon Reborn in Rand's body. So that could have been a real internal struggle if, like Firestorm, if the professor and, Ronnie Raymond, if it had been Luz saying, don't do what I did, or do what I did, or there had been something internal going on, because it kind of teases that type of incarnation or reincarnation dichotomy. But it wasn't that at all.
I think that's just a bad line, because all through the show, at least, they've implied that it's just a spark. It's the same soul, different personality. So.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, what? Oh man. See, now y'all got me thinking about my father. What would every father do if you could go to your son at the pivotal moments of his life and say, son, don't do that, or son, do this? Would that be a temptation? Would that add to tension? What parent doesn't want to say to their child when their child is in those critical decision points? Because most of the time we understand them better than they do. You're making critical decisions. You're not old enough to understand what this is going to mean as life unfolds. So if we had got even a hint of that there's some type of that kind, but he says the line, but I'm like, it falls flat because it doesn't have any weight, because we never got the sense that Luz was still in there. We had a sense that Rand was just trying to figure out what was going on. So I'm like, once again, anyway, so let me see. So Steve.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess I'll talk a little bit about why Matt would have been a better choice for this. The problem I had the whole time watching this is like, okay, we know Rand's going to say no, because he's a classic hero through and through. I mean, he's the farm boy, living in the two rivers, and he has this classic farm boy moral values, and he's going in there. It's like, all I want is to have, a wife and family, and I don't want to be involved in any of this. He's going to do the right thing because he can't live with himself knowing that he's given in to someone he knows is a bad guy.
He's boring.
There's no tension. Yeah. In that position, when we know he's the bad guy, it's boring. When something like Anakin, it's like, okay, you can understand why Anakin would be taken in by this charismatic guy who acts like a father to him and all these other things. And then later on, when the mask drops, Anakin has to make a choice. Okay. And by then you have that emotional bond there. That's not the case with Rand at all. He doesn't know who this guy is. All he knows is that the Dark One is evil. He's walked through his blight the entire way through. It's like, yeah, this guy's evil. He's called the Dark One. It's like, read the label. He knows. So yeah, it doesn't really work with that. But with somebody like Matt, who has always consistently been about what Matt wants, he's got that selfish instinct. He's already surrendered to darkness at least once that we've seen. He's the one that even Moraine is sending the Red Aja after because, she's worried about him going bad. So him facing this choice, then you would have a real conflict because it's like, would Matt actually do this? Or would Matt say, okay, the best way to save my sisters is, to make sure this guy is locked up. What would that choice be? It would have been a much, much more interesting choice. Now, granted, we need to see Rand as the chosen one step up and become, the Dragon Reborn and all of this. I felt like that stuff was to a certain extent handled okay. I got the sense that we definitely get the sense that Rand always was Lews Therin. If you look at him in the flashback early on in the episode, what is his concern? His concern is with his baby. His concern is with his child. So he's a family man in the same way Rand is. So you see that it is basically Lews Therin in this new body. It's just that his background has changed. He doesn't have all the training of being an Aes Sedai. He doesn't remember who he was in the Age of Legends. He doesn't remember any of his past lives. All he remembers is growing up in the Two Rivers, and basically whatever Tam told him about his past. So yeah, he is a bit ignorant. The Dark One picks up on this, and he thinks that makes it easier to manipulate. But in fact, I think it's kind of worse in a sense, because he doesn't have any ties to the past, to hold him back. He doesn't know the Dark One from before. There isn't any of that past relationship, that might have intruded on his decision here. So what ends up happening is that everything is foregone, because you've got a guy who has no memory of this character. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know who he was, and he's making probably one of the easiest moral decisions in the world. It's like, why can't I do the right thing and get Egwene afterwards? What are you offering me that I can't get for myself, after I defeat you? He's got nothing on him. Nothing whatsoever. I mean, there's not even like the fear of him doing anything to him, because the Dark One needs him alive. So, and that's really, which gets into another disappointment, which is the Blight. Now, it's a justifiable one story-wise, because you understand why the Dark One is not, doing anything with the Blight to Rand and Moiraine, because he wants Rand to get into the middle of his trap. Of course, nobody points out that, hey, this is way too easy. We're having way too easy of a time getting, to the center of the lair. There must be something going on. Nobody brings this up, even though that's obviously what happens. But in return, we also don't get any scenes where the Blight actually shows itself to be a menace. All we get is, okay, yeah, this kid is covered with fungi and rot and all of this. Yeah, don't play with the rotty things. Don't play with them. Did you touch it? Did you lick it? No. So you have that, but you don't see vines coming to life and trying to stop them. You don't see the terrain getting in their way, or any monstrous bugs attacking them, or any of a number of things that you would expect would exist in a thing called the Blight. This thing that everybody is afraid of and doesn't want to get into because of the corruption of by the Dark One. But we don't see why it's so deadly, except for, okay, those guys are dead, move on. And then nothing happens except, okay, yeah, we have a dream sequence, we have a temptation sequence, and oh, by the way, here is my offer, and you're going to reject me because it's so bad. Yeah, this whole thing, I like what it tried to do, but the execution was way off.
Now, let me say this before I throw it to Bracy. Also, we have a MacGuffin in the Sangreal.
Yeah.
In that, and it felt to me, it smacked to me like Rise of Skywalker. Like, the Dark One, he's all the Sith, and now you're all the Jedi, Rand. So you've got the little MacGuffin, and not only can you channel, you can super channel. And I was like, okay, this is like the introduction of this thing at the last minute. And I'm like, I can understand why Moiraine would hold it back, because you want to put it out there, maybe. But I'm like, did they have well, I guess they couldn't have had the super channel thing, because it held the spirit and the essence of all the people that had channeled before, or whatever. But I'm like, wouldn't that accelerate the madness in a dude if you can super channel? Or is it so? You're just drawing a regular amount of power, then it's getting amplified, but isn't that power coming through you, or it's amplified through the Sangreal? I don't know. It felt like a funny MacGuffin to me. It felt like a funny thing to introduce right before the final fight.
I got the impression Moiraine didn't think that either of them would survive it.
What'd you say? Say it again.
I don't think that Moiraine thought that either of them would survive it, that maybe Rand would die imprisoning the Dark One. because he didn't have the ability to control it.
Okay.
Did feel like a suicide mission from the get-go.
Well, definitely on her part, yeah. But I don't know. It just felt like a funny thing. It felt like a funny thing to introduce at the last minute, because my first response to it is, what if you don't have it? What's your backup plan? What if it gets lost? Or what if he takes it? What if he can see it coming and be like, boop, then what? So I don't know. It just felt like a funny thing.
I'll add one other thing. She thought that it was the last battle, the dragon is supposed to die fighting the Dark One at the last battle. So the fact that she realizes, okay, yeah, it's the first battle, not the last, which means that she probably did think that Dran was going to die there.
Okay, we're going to talk about that in a minute, because that's a whole other thing that just had me. Anyway, Bracy, did you talk about this? Jump on in this if you haven't talked about this.
Yeah. First of all, I have to agree with the Blight. I believe I mentioned this before. The Blight is very cool. I still don't see why the Blight is a problem. How did it overrun Land City? Why can't you just burn down the Blight? I don't get the menace of the Blight. What's to stop you from just cutting down the Blight? How is the Blight encroaching? If it's going to be all fungal, let's make it creepy. Let's make it spores. That's scary as hell.
Mm-hmm.
Spores flying out and getting in your skin and your passages and infecting you that way. That's something they could do. But one thing that was impressive upon me watching this episode again, I feel like looking at the last episode, they just ran out of money because the production value and the scenes and everything is so anticlimactic, so low down compared to what we've seen before with some of the great first battle we got and the midpoint battle we got later on and some of the extravagant sets and everything. This was a very small scale these last couple of episodes. And so I just feel like they ran out of budget and everything got really truncated later on when we see the matron of the city with the fellow female channelers, and she's out there on this big CGI open plane. I was like, man, that sucks. This is bad. And that goes on into this because I felt like this was anticlimactic for a couple of reasons. One, Rand's not going to be swayed. Come on. We haven't done anything to show he's possibly going to be swayed. He is that guy. He is the corn-fed farm boy. He is the Boy Scout. He is the chimpanzee, as we've said time and time again. There's like nothing in this dude that's like the darkest thing he's done is getting pissy about his girlfriend, deciding like, you know what, I don't really want to marry you and have kids either. I'm gonna go be a wisdom. And then he's like, well, that's okay, even though I dream about it being the other way, whatever makes you happy. Like no. This dude is the total white knight. No, at least like you guys said, because they so wanted to save it to the next to the last episode that Rand was the dragon. We get hints from everybody else. They think they're pulling the wool over our eyes. No, guys, we always knew it was supposed to be Rand. You might as well just owned up to it and had his past life, not just like, oh, I think I've seen this place before. Have Luz talk to him. I love Steve's idea of them like having this psychic argument, building up to that, these inklings of that, and just it crescendos as we get here, but we don't get that. When we look at the temptation, again, the actor playing Logain would have been so much better in this role, and maybe this guy would have been better as Logain. I kept thinking, this is not tempting. Rand figures out very quickly, he's already had one dream within a dream, and now this happens. It's very easy to see, like, oh, this is a dream. Obviously, I'm missing time. I don't care how disoriented I am. And he even goes so far as to try and prove to himself that this is Egwene. And, like, oh, what did we write on the tree? And then, she has the right response. Oh, it is you. And just when he's convinced, this is when you can start tempting him. When you've got him convinced this is his world. Be subtle. No, he's like, ta-da, I'm the man behind the curtain. Now, all this can be yours if the price is right. Like, no, that just broke everything. So it's not her. After you just convinced yourself it's her, but it is not her. Here's what would have been far more interesting. The women are getting set for their line of defense in the battle, when all of a sudden Egwene disappears. Egwene appears at the Eye of the World. Moraine's like, what the hell? Egwene's here? And she's tranced out just like Rand. And, the Dark One's like, oh, I got a trick or two up my sleeve, don't I, lady? She appears in the dream, and it really is her in the dream. And he's like Jedi mind tricked her into going like, Rand, I was so foolish. I should have never cast you aside. What has the White Tower got when like you are the one who's always been there? Messing with Rand through her. Because, when he slits her throat, and like Rand kind of panics because it's the image of her. Yeah, it's disgusting to see. He's like, oh no, like, hey, I thought you didn't believe in her. What would have been more impactful if it really was her? If I'm really killing her, and she acts like she's dying. She's not just sitting there passively bleeding out. What if she starts to gurgle and spurt? What if the crib suddenly bursts into flames and you hear wails coming out of that? Okay, that's not good enough for you? Oh, Rand, you're made of sterner stuff. Let's try this, because evidently I can peer into your mind because I knew that little secret thing that you and Egwene had. Well, if you don't want this, Rand, since there are 5 of you who are spokes in this wheel, who are center points for the turning of the wheel, all of a sudden Perrin appears. And he's there. And it's his family with Egwene. I mean, he is a widower at this point. And these two have a pretty good bond. You've noticed it, haven't you? Haven't you seen how close they are? And, she didn't really deny that there was something between him. That's temptation. Look at the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Look at how the White Witch tempts the brother Edmund. How he takes all of that resentment and that sort of sibling thing that you've going on. And these guys, they're all kind of like siblings, these friends that have grown up together. And how that turns around. And, that was actually C.S. Lewis's intent. The Turkish Delight was like a representation of sin. And how the more you get, the more you want. And there was a more elegant way to do this, and they just failed utterly. And then when Rand does make his decision, and I do feel like that was channeling the power through the item and not through himself, although he did say he could feel the madness already from touching the power that one time. That, again, is anticlimactic, and again, I feel like they just ran out of money, because I was really expecting like some Harry Potter-style battling going on. I wanted to see the explosions. I wanted to see the fireballs, the lightning bolts, the Avada Kedavra, all this stuff. And instead, he just like nukes him. We win.
I could throw out another possibility, and that is to play the card from Return of the Jedi, another Palpatine trick. In Return of the Jedi, here, what does Palpatine do? He talks all about how, oh, your friends will not survive. I have planned everything so perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, your friends are in danger. Join me, and I will make sure that the one you love will survive.
Yeah, like if you
Something
can't
like that
catch somebody,
worked.
if
That's
you can't catch somebody with what they want, threaten them.
Yeah.
Don't give them an out.
See, and I think this is where it goes back to writing, because you need to very much understand what you're writing, the nature of what you're writing, and who you're writing it for. In this case, you are trying to write a tempter who is going to be insidious. They are going to tell you the sweetest of lies, and they're going to tell it to you with poison on their tongue to try and poison your soul and your mind. You need to write that in there as screen direction for your actor or director to follow. You need to really make that poisonous lie sweet and tempting, and something that we as the viewer are just screaming at the screen because we know what is coming. So,
I mean, because if we are getting this far away from the book at this point, why not just go ahead and go there? Look at Gabriel Byrne in The End of Days as the devil when he tempts Schwarzenegger's Jericho. Hey, I can bring your family back, and I didn't do that. God did that to you. It's like, I can be on your side. There was some serious temptation right there. Yeah. There was a way to turn him against who he should have been with. And it's all been done better so many other times, and we've all seen it.
The last thing I'll say, and so we can move on to something else, is I mentioned previously, we talked about the Devil's Advocate. At the end, we get the, sloppy spoilers, everybody. At the end, we get that twist where it turns out the whole point of the whole movie was the devil playing on Keanu Reeves' hero complex and willingness to do good for some purpose that we'll never know. I mean, talk about screwing with your mind. The devil wanted to do all of this, show him all these bad things so he could get Keanu Reeves to do what he wanted, which was the right thing, but maybe for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
That is Nexium.
Excellent point.
That's what Nexium is, what you just described. Okay, so now I want to get into the battle, but there's this thing that happens between Rand and Moraine and that scene in the battle. We have to talk about it. And I know Steve's down to talk about it, and I can't blame him. So before we actually get to the fight, we've got to talk about what's going on with the other characters, because in a short amount of time, they ratchet up the chicken scratch to the point where I was like, you have to be kidding me. And let me tell you what I'm talking about. Then I'm gonna throw it out to them. I'm talking about what's going on back in Faldar with the rest of our gang. First of all, Perrin and Egwene once again show they have superior chemistry, and she goes, "Are we all right?" And he goes, "Well, I'll always be all right." And I'm saying to myself, y'all had a real source of, even though I hate triangles, it was the chemistry between the actors is so thick until you had something that you could have played forward. You could have had both of them considering it, or you made it look like Perrin did consider it. And with one line, she's like, "Are we all right?" And he's like, "We'll always be all right." And that's it. All that great tension that you had set up about the fact that there is love there. And maybe it never blossomed beyond brother and sister. But human beings know you've thought about it. Okay? And I thought they were going to draw that out and leave it a thing between them to dangle in front of the audience to create a will they or won't they, because they do have great love for each other. They just maybe never, or at least maybe she hasn't, or maybe she has. They've never just let their hearts, because anybody that's over the age of 13 knows there comes a point where you make a choice to open your heart to a person. And because this has been kind of unspoken between them, and even Rand pointed it out, and Egwene is like, that's ridiculous. But no, it's not ridiculous. They just, maybe they never went there, because remember, Rand accused him of only getting with Layla because Egwene wasn't available. See, there's so much, if you're going to set that up, there's so much more there. And just with a couple of lines, they're like, okay, we're good. And I was like, that's thing number one. Here comes thing number two. Once again, it centers around Nynaeve. And we see someone that is not a professional tracker, not a real tracker, not an actual tracker. And she reveals that she somehow was not tracking land or water. She was somehow tracking Moraine because she has a tail.
And still never damn tells us.
So, right, doesn't tell us what it is, but do you understand what the show just said? The show just said that Nynaeve understands Moraine better than Lan does. I said, what did you say?
And another point which I would like to get to eventually.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm gonna let you jump in right after this. So I'm just like, that's like somebody you just met and they're trying to influence you, and then you talk to your mom. And your mom will be like, David Taylor, you can't fool me. I know what that person's trying to do, but I know you. And your mom would just read your mail. And I'm saying, y'all have spent the whole show talking about this unbreakable bond, and it's like Scott and Jean, and I'm in your head and you're in mine, and when I can't feel you, I freak all out, and if you die, I become suicidal, and whoever else I love you the most. Okay, but now all of a sudden, here comes Mary Sue Ray Nynaeve Palpatine talking about I wasn't tracking, and she's got a tail, and I'm like, so you're Wolverine now, you're Rambo now, in addition to all your suddenly Susan, the one powers, and I'm like, all right, Steve, just jump all in.
She is so overwritten, it's not even funny. And after all the things that we've seen, she has all these magical abilities that can heal anybody, and she can, knock Logain out with a big blast of nothing. And, because the plot says I can do this. And, and people can think I'm the Dragon Reborn because I'm just so powerful. Oh, yes. And then suddenly, in addition to the point that you pointed out, which is somehow she knows Moraine better than the person who's bonded to her. Yeah, that's nonsense. What's even worse about it is that it says that she is a better tracker than an experienced warder who has been going through the wilds and should know how to survive in the wilds, and who has been pretty much leading the group, throughout all the terrain, for since the beginning. You're going to tell me that the wisdom of the two rivers knows more about tracking than that guy? No, absolutely not. Not believable. It is so overwritten. It's stupid. And the only reason you can tell is because they wrote themselves into a corner, and they needed to give Lan a way to go after Moraine without being bonded. And it's like, you didn't even need to do that. You could just have Lan with his own tracking skills, which he undoubtedly has. I mean, you don't go through the Blight and go looking for people through the True Rivers for 20 years with Moraine and not pick up a reasonable amount of tracking skills. Just say, okay, yeah, they went over this way a few hours ago, and oh look, here's these footprints in the muck. Look at all these people that are not dead. These are fresh tracks. Let's go follow them through the mud. Something that would show how to do that, rather than already make an already overwritten and ludicrously overwritten character at that look worse. No. Just, I hated this. Everything about this is dumb.
Now, before I throw it to Bracy or Nims, whichever one of y'all want to go next, that's cool. I have to throw in this mini rant because they hit one of my pet peeves. My biggest pet peeve is omnipotent villain. I can't stand that. That's why horror movies do not scare me. They make me laugh because they're omnipotent villain. I'm like, no, you wouldn't be able to do all that. And you're chasing teenagers, so you ain't said nothing. But they hit another one of my pet peeves right here, and here it comes. I can't stand these big, deep, I love you so much speeches, and y'all love each other 2 days. I mean, I know it's been longer than that, but that's what it feels like. But basically, they break up because he's like, oh, if you go back to, the White Tower, and she's like, I might become more than wisdom. And she's basically saying, if I get trained, I'm going to need a warder, and, wisdoms can never marry, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, golly, I'm already bonded out to Moraine, oh man, I got this girlfriend, we've been together a long time. Can't be me, but I'm gonna hate him if he doesn't make you smile, and I'm gonna love him if he does, and blah blah blah. And I'm saying to myself, y'all realize y'all just had a hookup, right? Y'all realize that this wasn't this deep. You've been with Moraine, like Steve just said, for 20 years. And Moraine said, I don't have a home in the White Tower anymore. This horse, these boots, this pensive man, this quiet man at my side. Okay, that we can buy. Y'all been together 2 decades out in the woods. But here comes this deep kind of, and let me say for the record, you cannot love that which you do not know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what you can have at first sight is infatuation, lust, desire. It's not love until you see something at its best and you see it at its worst and you love it still. When I know you when you're right and I know you when you're wrong, and I love you still. I love you when you're up, which everybody can do, and then I love you when you're down, which very few people can do. Then I will buy that is love. Y'all had a hookup. And then you give this deep, impassioned speech about how, and I'm like, no. There's the human heart don't work that way. And out of all the characters should have been together, shouldn't have been y'all. But then now you just undercut the whole idea of his bond with Moraine, because you showed us 2 episodes ago that when a warder loses that, he becomes suicidal, and it takes everything he has to find a reason to keep on living. So he's got to hurry up and bond with somebody else because he actually can't survive. He's been cut off. She's out there with Rand. She left without telling him. And now he's pledging this kind of love to Nynaeve after introducing him to his surrogate family and one night together. And now you go hate the next man. I was like, if I could reach through the screen and reach through y'all, I was like, man, no.
Bracy. Do the Batman slap.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Bracy.
Oh man, let's talk about Nynaeve and her magic vagina.
Oh no!
Yeah, barring a line from
He just
from
went
True
there, y'all.
barring a little line from True Blood when Eric's vampire child was talking about Sookie Stackhouse and how she apparently could just magically captivate any male within a 50-mile radius. Sookie Stackhouse and her magic vagina. I've always liked that line. So here we got Nynaeve, who reminds me of Superman in the 70s, when the writers would just make up superpowers from issue to issue. Superman could just do anything and everything. Uh, just literally like make up a power. Like, oh, Superman needs to be able to breathe underwater. Yeah, he can do that. Superman needs to be able to see into other dimensions. I can do that. You never see him ever do it again. Never ever pops up. But just whatever was convenient. Like Superman can sneeze out gold powder puffs if he needs to. If it works for the story. I'm sorry, not if it works for the story. If the story just needs that MacGuffin, it happens. So this is Nynaeve. She is every woman. It's all in me. It's just going on like that. And even her having to give Lan the instruction on how to track Moraine. So I've been waiting all season, patiently waiting all season. How did you keep following him? How did you keep following him? And I think the doggone writers to a point where they're like, we don't really know how she's been tracking him the whole time. We don't have a clue. Let's make up some BS. Oh, she's got to tell. It's like you said, Steve. Like, what? No. How do you know Moraine better than her warder of 20 years? No. I don't care what kind of wisdom she is. She ain't got that much insight. It's not happening. It invalidates Lan and all of his experience. But what does he do? He turns around and immediately validates her. Oh, Nynaeve,
More beautiful than the sun.
you are the most beautiful thing, and you are courageous and amazing woman. You're the greatest thing I've ever seen. Bow down to the magic vagina. Just like no. I already didn't like her the series, and then last episode I really started to dislike her even more than ever. In this episode, I was literally just screaming "F you" at the screen. My wife is like laughing, and I'm like, yeah, I really hate this character this much at this point. So this my little segment here is just the Nynaeve mini rant, because everything about her, it just accumulates into everything I hate about poorly written characters. The character who just is everything that's impossible, and everything just works out for them. Nothing is ever earned. Everything is absolutely given. And then on top of that, on top of having everything the writers could give you, you are still a raving bitch. When she goes out to fight against certain death. Her and these five women together, they're fighting thousands of Trollocs, tens of thousands, maybe 20,000. They're saying, and it's like, oh, it's Moraine's too. It's like, we belong to no one but us. I just, if I could have slapped her through the screen, I would have done it. I would have smited her like an angry god from on high and erased her from existence. I would have thrown her down into the eye of the with the dark wind and said, deal with this for eternity, bud. She's just as evil as you. All right, I'm out.
See, when the character makes every one of us rant, okay, you have messed up. Nims.
I can't beat that rant right now. I need a Snickers before I can beat that rant.
You're not yourself when you're hungry.
I will just say that, yeah, that whole thing about her tracking and the tell is BS. She has a BS tracking system. Whether she's the BS, the tracking system BS, or who she's tracking is BS, you can make up your own mind. My personal opinion, she stole the bat tracker. She put a bat signal on the Moraine, and she's holding the bat tracker in that braid. That's why she won't, she's always going on about that braid, and she tracked her that way. That's what's going on here. All of that's, that's me just using humor to get away so that I don't start ranting about her. I will say that not only have they given us one Mary Sue, I'm sure we'll get to this, but they're giving us another Mary Sue by the end, because Egwene is suddenly going to have Mary Sue healing powers. You know, like her power is ramped up to 5,000 from a 2. But, you know, we'll get there. So we're going to have another Mary Sue. Great. The last thing I will say, though, is I want to talk a little bit about, and I said this over and over again, but I really want to hit on Lan and Egwene. That romance is possible. As someone who has dabbled in romance writing in the past, please don't go look for it. Please don't. But as someone
Lan
who
and Egwene or Perrin and Egwene?
Internet, you have a mission.
Not Lan and Egwene.
A mission.
Lan and Nynaeve.
Okay.
It's one of the tropes. It's the loner and the bossy female. It's that trope in romance. It takes a long time to set up, though. You need to have a number of different scenes because initially the loner is going to hate the bossy female. They're going to fight all the time, and then eventually they're going to find attraction. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other stuff.
Kind of like they did in the novels.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that has to happen, but that is the trope. So it can happen. It's written. It's in anime all the time where you have the female that punches the character all the time, and eventually they become attracted to each other. It's there all the time. It's a trope. But it doesn't happen all of a sudden. It doesn't happen with the magical vagina. It doesn't happen that way. None of that happens. So, in fact, if you really wanted to keep the form, if they had slept together, then the female would have been ashamed and had to assert dominance, and she would have punched the guy and ran away after she gave him some of the magical vagina. So I'm just saying, if you're going to put romance in here and try and change the story, be a romance writer, do your homework and look up the tropes because you're even getting that wrong. And it's bad.
All the romance so badly. It's like the romances that are unintentional are better than the ones that they're trying to set up. Yeah. And it's just they just keep screwing it up. It's just unbelievable.
And please don't go look for my romance writing. If I never have to write member or any of those other words again, I will be very happy.
I'm like, too late you put it out there, dog. You shouldn't have dropped that bomb. But anyway, so let's talk about the actual battle, which was another bunch of chicken scratch. I was like, the first thing is you can't. Oh, okay. Here I come with another little mini trope round. I'm just going to throw that out. My favorite example is Avatar, but it happens in every movie. You can't say something like, nobody's ever ridden this bird. Nobody's ever tamed this dragon, because as soon as you say it, you know that the Sam Worthington character, whoever that is for the first time, he's going to grab the dragon and tie the braid, and he's just going to be cruising around like Ray in the Millennium Falcon. You can't set it up. It's like, nobody ever did this before. Well, then, okay, we already know what's going to happen. So as soon as they started saying, we've stood guard for 1,000 years, I'm like, break out the Twinkies because we need to have a snack because y'all finna get slaughtered. Okay, and I'm like, so I knew that was coming. I already knew that it was the men that were going to get slaughtered the most in the slaughteriest fashion, and that they were going to be made to look incompetent again. Because like the opening scene, it was framed as if your pride won't let you admit when you're outnumbered. So I'm just going to go ahead on and try to die with some honor. But meanwhile, now it's not that it didn't happen with the women, but it didn't happen in the same kind of way. And so when I heard all that set up, I was like, we already know what's going to happen. If you came and talking about, we've stood guard for 1,000 years, I'm like, oh, y'all finna die. Okay. So I was like, yeah, okay. So I'll let Nims and Bracy talk about, once again, the actual military perspective of how much sense did it make to respond to the frontal assaults that the way you did. But see, here's my thing before I let this go. You can't say dumb stuff like we've done it for 1,000 years. If you know anything about strategic planning, what that means is that you've had more than enough time to run through all the scenarios. What if this happens? What if there's an air assault? What if we get flanked? What if we're dealing with something that burrows up from the ground? What if it's a biological chemical weapon? What if something's in the air? That's what would happen in 1,000 years if you've been guarding the same spot. You would run through all the possible scenarios you can think of and have some kind of plan B about it. You wouldn't be caught out there talking about, well, we're just going to die with honor and, and it's not going to stand all that. I was like, no, that's not what would happen in no 1,000 years. Okay. And then on top of all that, it's like, again, it felt like Apollo dying for nothing or dying for your pride. But I'm saying you've never encountered a situation where you had to face more opponents than you thought you did. You've never faced a situation where because that means that for 1,000 years, every battle was right where it needed to be for you to squash them, because these opponents squash you too easily. So that means every fight you've had up to this point, it's like in Rocky III, where all the fights he fought, they weren't angry killers like Mr. T, like Clubber Lang. They were just enough of a fighter so you can knock them out in 2 or 3 rounds and retain the title. That's what that means. And with the speed and the gore with which you got slaughtered, because it didn't occur to you once in 1,000 years to write down for future generations, hey, y'all, what's going to happen if we face 3 times the foes? What will we do? There's no fail-safe. There's no backup. There's no none of that. You just, no. And then going to the female side, it reminded me of that scene in Picard where once again the women touched the ring and they saw the vision and all the women went crazy except for one. It felt like that. Like they touched the one power and they beat them back and they're exploding them with nice purpley, sploochy explosions. But it's like, it's too much. We can't control it. We can't handle it. And everybody dies, including Nynaeve. And what happens? Okay. Mary Sue Ray Egwene Palpatine. Let me tell you the definition of Egwene's arc. She has convenient channeling powers. Every time the plot requires that she be able to channel, not only can she channel, but she can channel at whatever level she needs to make the next thing happen, which negates the idea of training. So both Nynaeve and Egwene, when they're up against the wall, their power works, pay attention, exactly the way it needs to. I'm like, then what's the point of training to be a Jedi whenever you get under stress, it'll just do what you wanted it to do? And so we're all rejoicing that Nynaeve finally went out. She went out with the electro eyes, burnt from the inside out, burnt like a side of crispy black bacon. We're like, okay, bye-bye now. And then here comes Egwene talking about, come back. And then here comes Swear. I was like, oh, that's when I started yelling at the TV. I was like, oh, don't you bring her back. I was like, oh. And sure enough, in a few seconds, Egwene raises the dead. I'm going to say that one more time. In a few seconds, because she's having a moment, Egwene raises the dead. That would be an awful convenient power to have, don't you think? But she's got that convenient channeling. And I was like,
yep.
So let me hear what you guys have to say about the whole battle sequence.
Yeah.
Whatever perspective you've got. Start with Nims.
Oh boy. I know we're running short on time, so I'm just gonna try and keep this short and sweet. First of all, let's get to this scene with the brother and the sister that you have behind you, DT, because this is what sets up everything that comes after it. This is mirroring the scene from the beginning. They're trying to put into perspective that once again, the men are doing all the stupid stuff. They're going off to fight the battle when the women are more, centered and wise, that we need to stay here and do this and not confront. Well, first of all, I think that's an insult to women, because there's plenty of women faced with the possibility of getting overrun that would be on that wall fighting mama bears to protect their children and their families and everything else. That's number one. Number two, militarily, that makes no blanking sense. Okay? None at all. You go to that choke point. We've already talked about this. You go there, you make sure that they die trying to get through the narrowest point, and they die from your hands. They die as they're piling on top of each other and stomping each other, trying to get through that wall, just like a Crush at a Kiss concert or something. They die, or at a soccer game. That's more appropriate. They die in every worst way possible, and they die so much that eventually they give up, turn around, and leave. That's what you're doing there. But no, she's telling her brother, who has done this fight supposedly his entire life, because the city has been doing it, how he's stupid, how he's wasting his life, how he's doing all these things, et cetera, on down the line. It just pissed me off completely. not only that, the sister, in this time where he is making hard choices, leaving his sister in charge, she's anything but in simpatico with him. Anything but. So it's like you are duplicating that first scene, and you're duplicating all the wrong things about that first scene. Okay, then they charge off to get to this wall. Right now, I've already talked about the wall. We've talked about all these other things going on. So I'm only going to spend a moment here. But here's another rant here: bad writing, convenient writing. You talked about the convenient channeling powers. Suddenly, these Trollocs, yeah, they're strong, but they don't change the nature and the composition of weapons. Weapons made out of normal metal and normal wood aren't going to chop through what looked like 20 inches of stone. They're not going to do it. They're going to break. Or you're going to be there for the next 12 hours trying to chop through about 6 inches of stone, and you're going to get shot down. That's just the way it's happened. But they didn't want it. They wanted convenient writing. They wanted to show that these men were dumb, and they just got rolled right over for being there at this wall. So we got Trollocs chopping through the stones and opening openings large enough for these big hulking monsters to get through these narrow arrow slits and then go in and kill the guy who was in charge. That is I'm sorry. Now I'm worked up. That's bullshit. Bullshit. I'm waving the bullshit flag. We have the bullshit flag in our house that we've waved. That flag it's up in the air, baby. It is going full tilt. Bullshit. I'm calling bullshit on that. Bullshit man from, was it Carl Pilkington's Bullshit Man showed up in full bullshit man costume. He was like, that's bullshit right there. That's exactly what it was. So then they run over this fortification, this barricade. Yeah, they run over it in like 10 minutes. Even if that rock is made out of Swiss cheese, they're not running over that barricade in 10 minutes. I don't care how badly it was placed and everything else. It's just not going to happen. Then we have the artillery, the Aes Sedai, and the other channelers. And that's a whole other problem, because now we've suddenly been exposed to the fact that there's all sorts of women out there who don't fall under the auspices of the Aes Sedai, who have channeling ability. Have the Aes Sedai shown that they're willing to have channelers of any type out there who don't submit to their authority? Hell, they kidnapped Egwene and Nynaeve, theoretically, to bring back to the White Tower because they had channeling ability. So how does that make any sense? That doesn't make any sense at all. You gotta explain this crap. Suddenly, these 3 other women show up who have enough channeling ability to go into this, mega weapon. But before we even get to that, why the hell weren't they on top of the tower? Why weren't the hell they on top of the wall as all these moron Trollocs are running down in this enclosed space? They could have just been blasted in there. Right. And then hit the wall and nothing would have happened. Everybody would have gone home and had some beer and we would have called it a day. We would have been happy. So that makes no sense. But okay, we'll throw that stupidity aside. Then we'll go to the whole channeling, lightning coming down, cool visuals. Did anybody realize that all the Trollocs were dead and the sister who was lecturing the brother was still using the power just because she was addicted to it and burned out people just because she couldn't give it up? Well, if that was
I can feel everything.
Yeah, if that was a possibility, as her brother, I might like her on top of the tower so that if she gets out of control, I just knock her ass out. And we save a bunch of people that way too. And then we get to the final thing where it's not enough that we have Nynaeve Palpatine. Now we're going to have Egwene Palpatine. She's going to be Darth Plagueis the Wise, who is extending life. So, I just, like I said, it's just one giant bullshit flag. It's flying from the heights of that tower. And there's not much else I could say other than, come on, guys. Come on. You got to be better than this. You've got to see this in your mind as a writer and go, does this make any sense? Because it just doesn't. It just doesn't. And I'm sorry, you don't have to be a military genius to know a lot of this doesn't make any sense. It's not hard to be like, why couldn't these casters have just been on top of the wall and just killed them before they could even get to the wall? It's just not hard.
Why would you make an argument from the beginning that men who channel are going to descend into madness, so they must be gentled, they must be tamed, they must be castrated, they must be cut off from the one power. If they can't handle it, it's going to drive them crazy. And then you sit up there and you get so addicted in a moment from channeling that you burn up everybody that's fighting with you. Because you have a Highlander moment where I see everything, I hear everything, I am everything, because you got the prize. There can be only one. And now you're just going to keep drawing from the power until it kills you. That means you're not better than the men you're chastising.
And the very last thing I'll say, and this goes to Jeff's point where I absolutely agree with him, they ran out of money. They never showed the Trollocs breaking through the wall.
No.
How did they get through the wall? I mean, maybe a few of them got in through the openings. They were chiseling through the wall impossibly. How did the whole damn army of 10,000 people get through that wall in 10 minutes?
They just condensed everything.
Yeah, that is some next level uberness. Like, that is the Joker is sitting there going, how the hell did they pull that impossible shit off? You know, because out of the man who never dies. I mean, because Egwene comes in and saves him. But, you know, it's like, what in the hell is going on here? So,
Steve, the battle.
Yeah, I think I'll defer to Nem's expertise on when it comes to the actual fight itself. But I do have some things I will add to what was said. One is that I think it's clear what Annalisa was kicked out of the White Tower for, because she clearly has an issue with, you know, I like this power too much, I have to use it. Because I had noticed that she was not willing to turn it off. So I'm beginning to think that she was probably kicked out for this. The thing of it is if she was a Colonel Kurtz type, wouldn't it have been nice to have seen that beforehand to get some setup for this, so that so when they realize, oh my God, look what we walked into. We've given our power to this woman. How do we get this to go off? Nothing, none of that. So it's another mixed opportunity. It's again a situation where this show really is bad at managing its time. And once again, things that are important are not so shown, and things that are, things that are not important are shown. It's just absolutely ridiculous. The death of the king bothered me a lot, even as somebody who is not as versed in military stuff as you two are. I mean, have you ever heard of taking cover? Have you ever heard of ducking? Have you ever heard of hiding behind the side of the window so that when the arrows come in and the Trollocs keep coming in with their big axes, you don't get freaking chopped up into fish paste? Why are you...
No, I do. You brought up a great point. I have to say this, Steve.
I'll address that when it's my turn, boy. I've got something to say about that.
But when the king got stabbed like that, he went out like a bitch. I'm sorry. He really did.
He totally did. And it's like,
Khan sitting there, half his face burned off with Kirk going away, and he's like, "From hell's heart, I stab at thee." And then this dude is just like, bye, with the spear.
It's like, we're going to win because we've won every single time we fought this battle. And yet he shows no ability. And then in addition, it's like, here he is, going with his arrows when it's clear that the Trollocs are getting closer and closer. He should have gone for his sword sooner, and he should have fought smarter and fought like an actual experienced combatant, which he should have been. If you're going to take the front, and lead from the front, then you should be able to fight like you're been on the front. I don't see that with this guy. This is just it's a disaster. And then on top of this, the whole business with Nynaeve, blowing everything up and having her apparent death scene, which, okay, I will give that. It was enjoyable. And not just because I enjoyed watching her die, though I did. She actually had a moment where looks like she was doing something, actually for someone else. Like she actually had some concern for Egwene.
Heroic.
Okay, if you're going to kill her off, that would have been the way to do it. I'm absolutely fine with that. The problem is that once again they screw it up by showing her come back, and not just because they brought her back. You could have had a really good cliffhanger for people who are not familiar with the books, where you could have had her, Egwene saying, "Oh, I need to try to revive her somehow," and just cut it there. And then you kind of left wondering, did she survive the battle or not? And that's something that you could have had as a teaser all the next year. Yes, and instead they not only screw it up by bringing Nynaeve back, but by bringing her back to the point where it didn't even seem like she'd even gotten a hangnail, not even a scratch on her.
You might have even gotten
Yeah.
me back for season 2 because I'd have been like, yeah, Nynaeve's not on the show anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So you screwed up by bringing her back, and by showing that you're bringing her back, and not only by showing that you brought her back, but that having her basically be healed to the extent where it doesn't look like there were any stakes whatsoever to it, and everything that was built up with Nynaeve's sacrifice was rendered pointless in the entire episode. So what was the point of that? What did it show us? Absolutely nothing. And it's a total waste.
If the sister had been a man, she would have been gentled and not just kicked out of the tower.
Oh, yeah.
And the more I look at that scene, the more I think that's what should have happened to her. If you do have that power addiction and they knew you had that power addiction and you know that you can overpower and burn yourself out and you know you can burn your team out. And the king would have had notes from, whoever fought in the past. This is what to do. This is what not to do. Not to get your head split and get fish paste, I think was Steve's phrase. Go ahead, Bracy. The battle.
Okay, I'll keep this really brief as well. Okay, when you're putting together a production as the director or the showrunner, the overseer, whoever is in charge of the vision, you've got to be aware of everything that's going to happen within the show. It's your responsibility. So looking at things that might not be done, I felt like, again, this was like short on money, short rushed. Things were put in place that weren't cohesively looked at. When you look at the structure of the castle that is bridging the gap, it's very tall and it has these arrow slits, and you see that the archers are firing down into the Trollocs, very clearly firing down. So there doesn't appear to be any ground level arrows being fired, which would make a great lot of sense. Think about the Game of Thrones and the wall. We had one central gate, and then everybody else was up on the battlement of the wall, firing down. This is what they did to keep the army from breaking through the wall. It was virtually impassable any other way. You had to either climb it and take a long time and get your butt shut off, or you had to break through those gates and know that those gates were going to, like that whole tunnel is going to be defended all the way through, whether it's groups of men, murder holes, extra gates as they ended up having. That's the sort of thing that you've got going on. So looking at that, the FX doesn't match up with what we see. We see them firing down in the Trollocs. But then all of a sudden the Trollocs are at the arrow slit, breaking through. How did they get up there? Are they using siege ladders? Why isn't somebody just sitting there in the arrow slit, chopping them down, and they're, all right, Archer, get back over here. Okay, crossbows are more powerful. Great. But why aren't you using bows? Better rate of fire. A crossbow has to be reloaded on each shot, or have a mix of archers, because we see the women have archers. Why don't we have archers as well as crossbowmen?
Just a quick comment, because I know you'll know where to go with it. In an earlier scene, they showed that they had ballista and mini catapults in the city.
At the castle. Why aren't these up on the wall? If we're not going to put the women on the wall as artillery, why aren't these up on top of that fortification? Absolutely. Another reason, like this whole division of men and women and division of power doesn't make any sense. And so I guess this whole thing is made out of sandstone, because boy, these Trollocs can knock through it real easy. And even then, when an enemy starts to overrun your battlements, you immediately go to hand. He should have been ready to go to hand. He waited way too long. And once again, because the perspective we were given, and I can only go by what we're given, the perspective we're given is they are firing from on high. If that is the case, where the hell did that spear come from? I mean, did somebody just get a really lucky shot? It would have been a lot more interesting to see like a Trolloc down there in the mass, like throw one. But again, we've run out of money. We don't have a whole bunch of guys in suits down there. It's all CGI'd to crap. So we've just got to have unexpected spear from nowhere, when it would have been much more interesting if he gets into like a little exchange with a Trolloc with a big axe who gets past his guard and hits him. And frankly, what I would have liked to have seen more, because it would have been more interesting, and something we're kind of due. He should have, like, when he knows it's going to fall. Let's say like we break through the gates and there's like a courtyard. We've got a courtyard fight before they get through the next thing. Let's see this guy fight. We know he comes from this part of the world that's got like this kind of samurai tradition. But we really, outside of like land and some brief scenes with the waters, we never really get to see the men shine. And these guys have been
Yep.
doing this for 1,000 years. Let's see them fight. Let's see him go out like a king, like a warrior, instead of like a friggin' bitch. Because, like, man, he
We
just
needed a
gets
Helm's Deep moment, and we never got it.
Yeah.
exactly. That's what we needed. Let's see this guy show what 1,000 years of experience to do. Instead, we get this, oh, your father's armor protected him and grandfather. Like, if that armor's that great, why does he even have his own armor? That doesn't make any sense. What was that? What was the point of that? Other than it's another way for them to inject men are full of ego, and that's always going to get them killed. But guess what, women? You're always berating and never coming together. So, like, you can look at this world. I don't know if this was their intention or not, but you can see the division of men and women are responsible for everything wrong in this whole world.
Yeah. And I don't want to get into a whole long dissertation on military tactics and strategy, but I think Steve's point on Helm's Deep is right on. Token fought in World War I.
Yep.
At Helm's Deep, they fought on the wall. They got overrun. They fell back to a secondary position. They fell back to a third position, and eventually they fell back to a bastion. I mean, it's overlapping fields of fire. You got choke points, all sorts of things. It's just basic hand-to-hand, ground level infantry tactics that you use. It's nothing that hasn't been taught for years.
And you know what sucks is because this show has shown us two really excellent scenes of war and chaos and fighting. It's like you said earlier, DT. Don't show us something that's less than what you've shown us before. This should have been the overwhelming climax. This is the assault on the Death Star at the end of Jedi, at the end of Star Wars. This should have been the big payoff of the series, and it's a big it's a fart in the wind.
Putting it mildly. Okay, for the sake of time and for the sake of, I'm not really interested in it, because what it did was it gave us two endings. The real ending should have been Moraine and Land, but then we get back to, let me look up his name. We get back to Fane, Fane, and he takes the dagger and he takes the horn, and the dragon is supposed to blow, and he's got Phase with him. He slaughters everybody but Perrin, and he's making the same argument the Joker made. It only takes one bad day and you turn to the dark side. We had two endings. So I wasn't interested in that whole scene because I was like, once again, if you're going to bring us back to that, if walking into an impenetrable castle is that easy, and exiting is that easy, and taking the prize is that easy, then everything you said up to this point was a lie. So that whole scene just disinterested me, and I'm like, yeah, okay. You're trying to make the little, minstrel, joker, jester, Loki, trickster character more important than he really is, and you said the same thing twice. So the real ending for me, we're going to go out on everybody's endings. The moment for me was seeing that Moraine had been disconnected from the One Power. That's the biggest moment at the end. I don't think it was handled as well as it could have been, but that was the biggest oomph, the biggest weight, the biggest impact, the biggest, the character we've been following from the jump all of a sudden can't do. It's like, it wasn't as gruesome, but it's almost like the Batgirl to Oracle moment. Your life has changed now. Now you have to become something else. It's that big of a deal. I was really disappointed because I'm talking about endings. I was really disappointed with Rand just saying, I felt it. I felt the madness. So if I stay around, I'm going to kill everybody I love, right? She's like, yeah, that's true. So he's like, okay, well, I'm out. Where you going? I don't know, but just, tell everybody I died. And then they're going to show me traveling and what? You're the Dragon Reborn. Everything up to this point has been about you. And then you're like, well, I touched it and I felt the madness and I might lose my marbles. So I think I'm going to become a nomad or a wanderer. Is that what you're doing? How's that going to play out? Especially since you said all of them have a part to play. So we know that even if you guys aren't in the same locale, because remember, two endings, we know that this stuff has to be resolved next season because y'all said twice in two separate scenes that all of them have a part to play. Okay. And then now I don't buy Lan all of a sudden being in love with Moraine again because I felt like I was in high school and you just broke up with the girl you hooked up with and now you're back to your longtime girlfriend, and now I'm supposed to believe that are you okay, and open up the bond and let me back in just like a kid. They cut me off from the 1 pound, and I'm like, okay, so y'all having a moment now. And so, but still, her losing those abilities were huge. And then, so the way it's left with everyone makes me not really care. I'm supposed to care. And then we have the final scene where we have the ships coming in, the red flag ships, and then we see them channeling. And it felt to me a little bit like the Aztecs felt in Alien versus Predator. I was half expecting a chest burster to come out in any minute. Seriously, I thought they were going to channel and then give birth to an alien. That's what they look like to me. And so then we see the Aquaman tidal wave coming up and the little girl on the shore fade to black credits. So if you haven't read the books, you have no context for that scene. If you don't know anything about what's going on in the story world, that doesn't mean anything to you. And Bracey's phrase is, we shouldn't have to do the work of the movie, or we shouldn't have to do the work of the episode, or we shouldn't have to do the work of the show. Because was that little girl, just like, remember what was it, Last Jedi ended with the little boy finding an emblem, and it was a big anybody can be a Jedi moment. So when you
it's like he forced grabbed the broom.
Right. So when you see a little girl on the beach, after all you've shown us all season long, you think, is she, a potential channeler? Does she have what's her significance as soon as you see her? And then we see this other thing in the wave come up, and then I'm like, so in terms of the way everything ended out, Moiraine's moment of confessing she couldn't channel anymore, which I hope gets reversed, by the way, because what's she gonna do? I mean, I want to see her not have it for a while and have to adjust to life like that. That might make her more sympathetic to the men she's gentle, maybe. Because we know Lalandra's going to throw it in the face if Lalandra finds out she can't channel anymore. So
I would say that final scene, speaking of Jeff's point again about being out of money, puts that final scene in a whole nother context, because it's like, look, this season sucks so bad, but we're going to spend some money with a tidal wave and the fake CGI fleet, so you'll at least come back next season because this looks kind of cool. Yeah.
So when I'm looking at where the characters are, I fully expected Perrin to wolf out, Hulk out, Yellow Eye out, because he did it before when his life is threatened. But for some reason here, maybe he didn't think he could take a fade. I guess I can kind of understand that. But I'm like, just having him around, and Loyal once again proves he was a near useless character, because he dies and it doesn't really make a lot of difference.
Yep.
So that's how we leave Perrin. He's standing around in the slaughter, and I'm like, so what? And so we leave Egwene with her convenient channeling powers, raising Nynaeve from the dead. So they're both back, and now they have a bond or whatever. Rand just walks off from everybody. Moiraine can't channel. Lan goes back to his old girlfriend, and then we see characters we don't know nothing about doing. We don't know what they're doing, and we don't know what that means. So that's not how I wanted to feel at the end of this episode. And before I throw it out to my co-host, I also felt like the Dark One wasn't really all that. It didn't feel like, see, in Empire, Vader had been chasing Luke the whole movie. And then Vader finds out in the middle of the movie that Luke is his son, but the audience doesn't, which is brilliant, because they use language where the Emperor tells Vader, that's your boy, but he doesn't say it outright. So when Vader reveals it to Luke, we're shocked because we found out the way Luke does. That was brilliant. But you feel Vader and his desire to get to Luke throughout the whole movie. So when they finally get together in the carbon freezing chamber in Cloud City, man, that has been building. Just like when Rocky faces Clubber Lang again, just like when Rocky faces Drago, that's been building the whole movie. But I felt like the Dark One got dispatched so easily and so summarily. I'm like, you can't be the boss character. How could you be the boss character? So they should have had him maybe, fight somebody else. Because I'm like, if he could get rid of you that easily, if your temptations don't mean anything, and they use the Sangreal, and but you smiled when you went out, which means I'll be back. Okay. So then everybody says that wasn't the last battle, it was the first battle. So now I'm like, so basically what you're saying is your whole storyline is a big old circle. We're just going to go in circles and just do the same thing like the Flash. Barry causes a problem. Barry don't learn nothing. Barry says, I'm not fast enough. Barry gets the pep talk. Barry cries. And then somebody else saves the day. Loops. Okay. And that's what it made me feel like. I'm like, okay, we're just going to do this whole thing again. Different locales, different whatever. And Dark One's going to come back in another form. And there's going to be some other twist on the Dragon Reborn. But, just this right here. I was like, So I don't know. We'll review it, if we want to for the show or whatever. But what I'm saying is, I wasn't excited. I wasn't full of anticipation. I didn't have that, man, I can't wait to see what happens next. At the end of The Flash season 1, Eddie died. He sacrificed his life to kill Thawne, and Jay Garrick's helmet flew out at a time warp. So we were like, whoa.
You gotta leave people wanting more, even if you're not planning on giving them more.
That's right. That's right. That's how you end a season. And I didn't end wanting more. I end saying, what? So let me hear how y'all feel about how all the endings, so we can wrap up. Start with Bracy.
Okay. Rand leaves because he's going to go insane. Well, that's terrible. You're going to kill people wherever you go if that's what you think. Go back to the White Tower, get gentled, whatever, because you're just a threat waiting to happen. Dumb. I don't care. I'm not even going to get into the girls again with Nynaeve. No. We enough of that. Climactic ending with tidal wave threatening little girl. I don't know. I guess that's supposed to tug at my heartstrings. Got nothing to her other than she's a little girl. Don't care at all. The thing I should have cared about, Moraine with no power. That really should have been the end. That should have been the focus. That should have been something that we could have got into. Final summation, hollow. Everything is hollow. I started out liking the show very much, looking forward to the next episode, even with the problems. It is so full of plot holes, especially this last episode, so full of breaking its own lore, its own logic. Like I said, I've never read in the books, but I can see the departure from the source material. And I haven't read it, but I can see it. And it is so broken, it's irreparable. I will only come back to this if we're reviewing it. I have no interest in going forward.
Nemesis said it at the beginning of this review. You have to pick one. Okay? And
I'm reading the books. I'm going into the books.
And they picked, we ran out of money, so we're just going to throw everybody up in the air. Nims, endings.
All right. Let me start with the very ending they had with the little girl. This was a waste. I think your point about the Dark One is excellently taken. And I'm going to go back to Star Wars. How does Star Wars end? Well, it's not how it ended, but the ending for one of the characters was Darth Vader and his TIE fighter going off into space. The Dark One should have been shown back in whatever prison he's imprisoned in, or where he's been, captured. I don't want to give spoilers away, where he is, and he's infuriated and he kills somebody or lets out his anger, and we see it, cut to black, that's it, done. Oh, what's going to happen next? That should have been the ending. The post-credit scene, for instance. I'm not going to get in the girls either. I've waved the bullshit flag on that. I've moved on. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the ending with Lan and with Moraine. This was where you could have had your real dramatic stakes. Real dramatic stakes. And this is how it goes. It's a very simple scene to write. It's a trope, but it would have been effective. Moraine, scene. Lan is walking away. I'm done. I'm out. This isn't the actual dialogue, but I'm done. I'm out. You can't leave. This wasn't the final. This is where she says, this wasn't the final battle. This is only the first one. We need you. She goes, he's like, you take care of it. I'm out of here. I've already sacrificed too much. I know I'll never have you, Gwen, whatever you want to talk about. And then she goes, I can't do it. I've lost my powers. Rand looks over his shoulder. I don't care, and walks away.
Now, let me ask you this. If losing the power, contact with the one power, drives a man to suicide, what does it do to an Aes Sedai?
Yeah. Right. But that is it right there. That sets up, if you end on that, sets up conflict. That sets up Rand being apart. that sets out Moraine. I mean, it shouldn't have been to Lan. She should have been begging him to stay, saying, "I've lost my power." She makes this big emotional reveal to him, showing her her weakness, and Rand just turns around and says, "I don't care," and walks
Yeah, he could just be like, he's like, "We're no longer bonded."
Yeah.
But I would have altered that scene slightly by your statement of "we need you." I would have had Lan say, "We need" or "you need."
There you go. That's another great one. But we're sitting here. We're not in a writer's room. We just started talking about this 4 minutes ago, and we've already written 2 scenes better than what was written there.
If he's going to give that kind of emotion to his goodbye to Naive, which we all call chicken scratch on, then it should have been a situation where you have to wonder, are you shallow now that your girlfriend can't do what you've been doing? Are you not attracted to her now? Or are you really burnt out from all that's going on? Or just all kinds of things we would have been wondering about.
And then Lan, who somehow speed forced his way through the Blight, following them.
Yeah.
As Rand is walking away, Moraine collapses to the ground, weeping over the futility of the situation, the fact that this was only the first battle and she's lost her magic, and Lan grabs her and is holding her in his arms. And that is the scene. And we're left going, what is the status of all these relationships? What is going on? I want to see season 2.
I mean, look at the potential here. If Lan and Moraine are no longer bonded, and he's made this big proclamation, like, "Oh, I'm going to hate the man you're bonded to." Here's his chance to bond to Nynaeve.
Yeah.
It's right there.
Also, before I throw it to Steve, what this also reminds me of, because I've been watching a lot of Revenge of the Sith lately. I don't know why, but I have been. You know what this reminds me of? What Moraine basically said by her actions was a prophecy which misread could have been. Because that's what that final scene was.
Yep.
I thought it was the last battle. I said, no, it's just the first. That means we was wrong. That means we've been wrong all season long.
I will say this, and this is real quick because I want us to get to Steve. I'm beginning to hate prophecies in fiction after George R.R. Martin and this, everything. I'm done with them. I'm just going to say that and leave it.
Okay.
So.
Steve, endings.
Yeah, I think you covered it pretty well. And I think that Jeff's term is perfect, and that is the word hollow. Because a lot of this could have been good, and it just feels really, really hollow. I think the one concern I've got about the Moraine ending, and I will say this was the best one of all of them, which I'll tell you something, was handled better in The Witcher. Because at the end of Witcher Season 1, Yennefer sacrifices herself by wielding the power of fire, to defeat the Nilfgaardians.
Yep.
Okay. She's not supposed to do this. She breaks the vow of her order to use this power she's not supposed to touch, and it costs her magic for a season. And then Season 2 is about her getting it back.
And I will say this, going back to what I was saying about Choose One, The Witcher is off the books. They have departed from the books, but they made the decision to just say.
But they're doing it well, though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
When they use the right things from the books, and when they depart, they actually do good stuff on it.
Yeah, and they said goodbye to the book and did their own story. So
Yep. And it absolutely works for that show. But I'm worried that we're going to see a little bit of the same motions in Season 2 with Moraine, except not done as well. And we're going to look at this and say, oh yeah, this is just Witcher all over again. And feeling as hollow as it has been. So my real concern is that they're going to have to find some way to set this apart in a way that is worthy of her character and brings her back in the way that she should be. And also preferably not take all season doing it, because that was annoying. But yeah, so you have that. The whole thing with Padden Fane and the Horn of Valere, there was no reason why we needed to see this. None. And it's clear that the only reason that the Dark One's forces were in there to begin with was to get this horn, which is a MacGuffin all in itself and doesn't even really come into play until book 2, which would be season 2 for this show. We didn't need the exposition on it. Just say, these people were holding on to this magical item that is really important to the pattern, and the Dark One didn't tell us, what it is, but he really wants it. If it had been something like that, and then you get into what it is in season 2, then you'd have something. But instead, what you're doing is, you're wasting valuable space on things nobody cares about because it has not been established. And because it hasn't been properly established, we don't care. So, and all of this, what we really needed to see was what Patton Fane was doing the entire season. And we just don't get enough of that to really care about him. And he's just a villain who's just occasionally been sprinkled through the season, and then now suddenly he's kind of important, except not really, because you could have had any dark friend, make the same speech and it wouldn't matter. And so, that whole thing, the only thing I will kind of say in regards to Perrin is I think that what they were trying to do was show that he's trying to take on the way of the leaf. He's trying to follow that philosophy, but we don't see it well enough. And you understand why he's doing it. And again, it's not shown because he's afraid that if he breaks the way of the leaf, if he turns to violence, that he's going to kill someone else that he loves. I mean, but it would have been nice if we'd actually had a discussion with Egwene about that earlier in the episode. It would have been nice if we'd had, an actual discussion about this. So we get some character development here and we actually see him facing that choice in a way that's significant and in a way that's emotionally satisfying. No, we don't get that. It's just a waste of potential. I mean, it's interesting stuff, but it's just dropped and it just doesn't work. And then the whole scene with the Shan-Chan, another scene you didn't need. It should have been the start of season 2. They're trying to tease season 2 with the arrival of the Shan-Chan, who are the guys in the boats. And they're pretty nasty customers. They could be interesting villains. It's an entire slave culture based on enslaving people who can channel. That's interesting. I would like to see where that can go, but you don't need it here. And it might be the little girl's a channeler and they want her because they want another acquisition to their collection. It's not shown.
Or she's going to baby Yoda the wave and stick her hand up and stop it.
Something like that would have worked. Yeah.
I think she's just a random little girl on the beach. It's about to get slammed by a tidal wave.
Yeah. 100-foot tidal wave. I don't care what kind of channeler she is.
Probably, but it would have been nice to see exactly what they were doing. But again, you don't need that in this season. All they're doing that is to say, oh yeah, we know what we blew it, all throughout the end of season 1, but stick around because we got something cool for you. And it's just, no, you didn't need it. And again, it's bad time management. Any number of things that we could have had instead would have been better. Actually, I wouldn't have mind seeing a short narrative, running concurrently with the modern stuff. Show what the heck happened with Luce there and Telamon and how the world broke. If you'd had something like that, maybe like a few minutes per episode where we see all that happen. And by the end, you see his confrontation with the Dark One and that went out and then mirror that with what Rand is doing here. You could have had something that would have made a lot more sense in context. But a little
bit of split time like they did with the first season of The Witcher.
Yeah, something like that. But better postmarked. But if you had something like that, you would have had something where it would have made sense, and you don't have the beginning scene that just completely drops on you and doesn't have context, and you wouldn't have a scene where you have this whole thing's teased out with the Dark One and it doesn't make sense to people who haven't read the book. So it's just the whole thing is just a mess. They're not using their time effectively. They're not using their resources effectively. And going by what you guys have been saying earlier this season about what's been going on earlier this episode, it doesn't sound like they've been using their money very well either. So they really need to start figuring out time, money, and resources better than they have, because this season has been an error-filled mess on all those fronts.
And that money all goes back to production and direction. If you know you're going to have this big set piece at the end, you got to save some money for it. You got to.
This is why you have line producers.
Goes back to what I said last episode or 2 episodes ago. They misused the ways. The ways is an exciting environment.
I just remembered one point I was going to say and I forgot about the fight, which is this was supposed to be a 2-front battle. We never saw that. Because what they were saying was, the reason why the Dark One is attacking now is because they've been using the ways to bypass the wall. You could have had a 2-front battle, but instead all we see are people attacking from one direction. And as a result, the whole thing falls apart.
That's right. So,
no money for it.
So, like I said, we'll probably review the second season just out of curiosity, but none of us are excited
Oh,
about the second season, which is a shame. You're not supposed to leave your audience feeling that way, you know, dreading coming back, or
hey,
and
you see this face, everybody? This is because of DT, and I do it for you. Yeah, I'm really sad.
At least it's not Picard season 2.
Oh, Jesus.
or Harley season 2.
Oh,
No.
Yeah, memories. So anyway,
bless your heart, Jeff. Bless your heart.
so we're going to end on that. The only other thing I'll add is I really hope we've seen shows change between seasons because the writing staff and the production team knew what they were doing and stepped it up and turned it into a different show. And this is how the Next Generation finally found its groove, although it took 3 seasons. So I'm saying that to say it's possible. It's possible when we come back next time that since they have book material, if people that know what they're doing can completely turn this up to another level and make it a show that's worth watching. But
Oh, God, I hope so, because they've left it a mess.
That's it, exactly. For now, they've left it a mess. And I'm going to end on that note. I want to thank my co-host for joining me. Thank you so much, Nims.
Oh, you're most welcome. But we're going to have some words about doing season 2 off. So.
Thank you so much, Bracy.
It's over for now, at least. Until the wheel turns again.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, the wheel weaves what the wheel wills, and unfortunately, what they have willed has not been the greatest show on earth. And hopefully, season 2 will change those things, because I want to like this show. I want to have something that's respectful of Robert Jordan, but we just have not gotten it here, unfortunately.
Yeah, y'all try to say the weave wheels where the wheel weaves where the wind. Say that 3 times fast. Okay, so we're going to see you next time. Don't forget to check out our other YouTube channels on Comic Crusaders. We literally have something for everybody. If you like retro stuff, we want interviews with creative people. We're covering contemporary shows. We're trying to stretch out in every corner of the sci-fi, comic book, and fantasy universe. So don't forget to get your different offerings, get your different fixes, and definitely leave us comments, join in the live streams, because we love to talk to everybody that's watching. And check out all the podcast versions on United Capes Podcast Network. If you're driving, or if you're in school, or you're doing things, you just want to listen to some good geek talk, we've got the content for you. And me and this crew, we will see you next time on the next episode of Sloppy Spoilers.